eastern Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. She was the youngest of two children to Eggy Diro and Tony Manno, with an older brother named Alessandro. Although her parents divorced when she and her brother were young, her father remained involved in their lives, providing financial support and staying in touch. During her school years, Celeste was outgoing, active, and popular. She participated in sports and dance, led the cheerleading team, and had ambitious plans for her future. Initially, she aimed to become a lawyer and enrolled at the University of Melbourne to study criminal and civil law. However, as she neared graduation, she found law unfulfilling and switched her focus to advertising and marketing. In 2018, she landed a job at a large e-commerce company that sold various products online. Celeste, a highly intelligent and talented individual, rapidly advanced in her career, going from a call center worker to a department head in under 2 years. Her exceptional abilities, initiative, and organizational skills earned her widespread admiration from colleagues. Besides her professional prowess, Celeste was also known for her stunning physical appearance, having been a participant in her university's beauty contest. With many admirers since her youth, Celeste was cautious in selecting partners. One such admirer was Lou Nader, a 16-year-older colleague who showed strong interest in her from the moment she joined the company. Notably, Lou was a reserved and unsociable person who lacked career ambitions, content with his long-held minor position. Celeste, a kind and smiling person, consistently turned down Lewis's requests to go out with her, always doing so politely to avoid hurting his feelings. Despite this, Lewis continued to try to get her attention through various means. To lighten the mood, Celeste would occasionally make jokes, but she remained firm in her decision to not pursue anything with him. Lewis, however, misinterpreted her behavior as a challenge and believed that Celeste was simply playing hard to get, vowing to win her over no matter what. Lewis's persistent attention was awkward, annoying, and refused to fade. Celeste maintained her composure, hoping that he would eventually lose interest or focus on someone else. However, as time went on, Lewis became increasingly obsessed with Celeste, and his infatuation did not go unnoticed by those around them. One day, Celeste confided in a close friend and colleague that she would never consider a relationship with Lewis, citing 3 reasons: his peculiar and unpredictable nature, his lack of ambition and life goals, and their significant age difference. Celeste's admirer, Lewis, made the fatal mistake of neglecting his work duties in his fruitless attempts to win her attention and affection. As a result, his productivity plummeted, and he received 3 reprimands and warnings from senior management. Eventually, he was dismissed from his job in early autumn 2019. When Lewis was fired, he was devastated and on the verge of tears as he packed up his belongings in the office. Celeste, on the other hand, felt relieved that the unwanted suitor would no longer be a nuisance, but she also felt guilty, thinking that her rejection had contributed to his downfall. Manno, the department manager, thanked Lewis for his years of service, escorted him out of the building, and offered him words of encouragement and luck before parting ways. Lewis misinterpreted Celeste's reaction to his sudden kiss as a sign that she had feelings for him, despite her clear discomfort. He convinced himself that she was hesitant to pursue an office romance due to her position as his boss, and that their social differences were the only obstacle to their happiness. Emboldened by this mistaken belief, Lewis decided to take matters into his own hands. After being fired, he created a social media account, found Celeste's profile, and sent her a friend request. When she initially accepted, he began sending her multiple requests to meet up, which she first tried to politely decline before eventually blocking him. Celeste's former colleague sent her another friend request on social media, this time from a new profile. Despite her attempts to ignore him, he began commenting on her photos, complimenting her appearance, and suggesting they would make a great couple. She tried to limit her profile settings to prevent this, but a week later, she was still harassed. During a family gathering, Celeste confided in her relatives about the unwelcome attention sharing the strange incident that occurred on the day he was fired. Her family listened, but they didn't take it seriously, assuming the admirer would eventually lose interest and leave her alone. What they didn't know was that the harassment was about to escalate. Although Lou didn't have Celeste's personal phone number, she started receiving romantic messages from an unknown number. She knew exactly who was behind them. The unwanted admirer sent her romantic poems, admired her beauty, and continued to try to convince her to go out with him. Manno received repetitive calls from her stalker, and she decided to answer once to have a direct conversation with him. She explained that there was no possibility of a relationship between them and asked him to stop contacting her. However, the stalker ignored her words and instead complimented her voice, expressing his happiness that she had finally answered his call. After this incident, Manno tried to block his number, but the stalker continued to harass her by calling from different numbers. This pattern of harassment persisted for months, during which Manno attempted to ignore him by blocking his numbers and fake social media profiles and not responding to his messages. She tried to maintain her daily routine, but the stalker's messages continued, transitioning from romantic to bold and threatening in nature. Eventually, the stalker's messages evolved from requests to demands, as he insisted on meeting Manno and sharing his delusional fantasies about what he would do to her. Celeste's situation took a dark turn when she discovered that her stalker, Louis, had started following her from work to her home, learning her address. At first, she didn't realize that Louis was physically present in her life, not just sending messages. She would occasionally catch glimpses of him near her home, but convinced herself it was just her imagination and paranoia. It wasn't until she finally acknowledged the truth that Louis was indeed following her every move, driven by his obsessive behavior. Celeste then sought police protection, requesting a restraining order to keep the stalker away from her and her home. However, the police were uncooperative and dismissive of her concerns. According to them, Louis hadn't broken any laws since writing poems and sharing explicit fantasies and messages wasn't illegal. Without concrete evidence of Louis's stalking, the police brushed her off, telling her to leave the precinct and let them focus on catching real criminals. A restraining order was finally issued against Sacco, prohibiting him from contacting Celeste in any way. At first, he respected the order and disappeared from her life for a few weeks, giving Celeste a sense of freedom and relief. However, her peace was short-lived. Less than a month later, she started receiving messages from unknown numbers. Sacco was pleading and then demanding that she drop the restraining order, claiming it was interfering with their supposed romantic relationship. Celeste immediately reported these messages to the police, as Sacco was violating the restraining order. As a result, he was fined and warned that further violations would lead to harsher consequences, including possible jail time. After this incident, Sacco remained quiet for almost 2 months, leading Celeste to believe he had finally left her alone. During this time, Celeste met Chris Redale, a young man who shared her interests, values, and goals. They quickly formed a romantic connection. Celeste opened up to her new boyfriend, Chris, about the harassment she had suffered at the hands of a former admirer. Although it had been over a month since she last heard from him, she still felt anxious about the situation. Chris was supportive and reassuring, doing everything he could to make her feel safe and cared for. As their relationship progressed, Celeste felt comfortable enough to introduce Chris to her family at a dinner gathering in early November. Her family welcomed him with open arms, and her mother even joked that Celeste was now in good hands. The next few weeks were peaceful, with no signs of the former admirer. Celeste was happy and carefree, spending all her free time with Chris. On November 15, 2020, the couple went on a date to a cafe, where they enjoyed each other's company and decided to capture the moment by taking a selfie. The photo of the couple turned out to be very romantic, showing them sitting together, embracing and smiling happily. Celeste was so fond of this picture that she decided to use it as her social media profile picture, also wanting to share the news of her new relationship and indicate that things were getting serious. Chris also shared the photo on his page, accompanied by a heartfelt caption expressing his love for Celeste and his desire to keep her happy. However, this outing would be the couple's last. Tragedy struck on the evening of their last date. After Chris dropped Celeste off at her home, they said their goodbyes and planned to meet again the next day. Celeste spent about an hour chatting with her mother in the kitchen about her boyfriend before going to bed, as she had to wake up early for work the next morning. But on November 16, 2020, around 4 a.m., disaster struck when Eggy was awakened by the sound of breaking glass. Eggy was awoken by suspicious noises, followed by banging, screams, and commotion. At first, she thought the sounds were coming from outside, but soon realized they were inside her house. Panicked, she rushed to her daughter Celeste's room, throwing on her robe and jumping out of bed. When she opened the door, she saw someone fleeing the room through the broken window. She turned on the light to find her daughter lying in a pool of blood, covered in cuts and tiny shards of glass. Celeste struggled to breathe, her eyes wide open and staring upward. Eggy called emergency services and tried to stop the bleeding, but it was too late. By the time the police and doctors arrived, Celeste had passed away. The autopsy revealed over 20 stab wounds on her body with a fatal blow to her heart. The police investigation concluded that the attack took less than 3 minutes, from the assailant breaking in through the window to the moment Eggy entered the room. Celeste was attacked with a large butcher's knife, and her attempts to defend herself left her arms with multiple cuts. When investigators asked her mother, Eggy, if Celeste had any enemies, she mentioned Louis Sacco, who had been stalking and harassing Celeste for over a year with frequent calls and threatening messages. Other family members, friends, and colleagues confirmed this information. At the crime scene, the attacker left behind a large number of bloody fingerprints and DNA evidence on a fence he jumped over while fleeing, which also indicated that he had injured his hand. It was crucial to detain and question Louis immediately as the prime suspect and to verify all the evidence and witness statements. Louis was arrested on the same day, but he initially denied any involvement, claiming that he loved Celeste and would never harm her. However, forensic results soon confirmed that the bloody fingerprints found in Celeste's room and on the fence belonged to Louis. Additionally, law enforcement discovered that Louis had violated a restraining order, preventing him from approaching Celeste. Furthermore, surveillance footage showed that Louis had purchased a hammer and a large knife at a local hardware store on the evening before the attack. Louis committed a horrific crime. He used a hammer to break into a woman's house through her window and then fatally attacked her with a knife. Louis bought a knife and a hammer and then waited until nighttime to carry out his attack on Celeste's home. His actions seemed deliberate and premeditated, yet his behavior was also erratic, raising questions about his mental health. Notably, the 39-year-old man had never been married, still lived with his parents, had few friends, and struggled to hold down a job. Louis was a nervous and introverted individual who struggled with social interactions. He also had a biological brother who was currently serving a long prison sentence for a crime. As a result, the court ordered a forensic psychiatric evaluation for Louis. His attorney argued that instead of imprisonment, Louis needed specialized treatment to address his mental health issues, which required professional attention. The victim's family was outraged by the argument that the criminal, Louis, might avoid punishment by claiming insanity. However, psychiatric experts concluded that although Louis suffered from mental disorders, he was fully aware of his actions during the crime and had even planned it in advance. As a result, Louis was forced to stand trial, where he continued to claim that he was mentally ill and not responsible for his actions. Despite his efforts, the jury found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to 36 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The case highlighted the need for reform in Victoria's criminal laws, particularly regarding online stalking. Celeste, the victim, had reported Lewis to the police in 2020, but her complaint was not taken seriously because the law did not consider online harassment a crime. Her mother, Eggy, worked tirelessly to develop Celeste's law, which would have introduced criminal liability for stalking on social networks. Although Eggy presented over 40 recommendations to the Legislative Commission, almost all were rejected. Research showed that most online stalkers do not escalate their behavior, and the resulting amendments only restricted access to confidential social media information and allowed restraining orders in severe cases. The case of Esmeralda Richiez. Esmeralda Richiez Martinez was born on August 23, 2006, in La Alta Gracia, Dominican Republic, to restaurant owners Alio Rosti and Isabel Martinez. She grew up in a happy and close-knit family with an older sister, and the two were extremely friendly. As Esmeralda grew older, she blossomed into a bright and beautiful young woman. She was passionate about singing, dancing, and showcasing her artistic talents on social media. In her senior year of high school in 2023, Esmeralda, also known as Morala, was a popular and cheerful student who was surrounded by friends. One of her close friends was 35-year-old John Kelly Martinez, a new teacher at her school. John Kelly had recently entered the public education system after passing a competitive teacher's exam and was undergoing a one-year probationary period. He quickly won over his students with his friendly approach, treating them like peers and organizing regular outings outside of school. John, a married teacher and father of two, prioritized his students over his family. He spent most of his free time with them, building trust and relationships. Esmeralda was one of these bright and beautiful students. On the evening of February 12, 2023, John met with his female students, including Esmeralda, outside of school. He picked her up last and introduced himself as her teacher, promising to drive her home afterward. They joined two other men and two female students, and John drove them to the beach in his car. Everyone except John and Esmeralda got out of the car when they arrived. The two of them spent some time alone before joining the others. They drank a few beers and took a short walk along the beach. However, their evening was cut short when Esmeralda suddenly fell ill and started bleeding. They had to rush her back home. The next morning, her parents found her dead. The autopsy revealed that she was murdered, leaving her parents with unanswered questions. The National Institute of Forensic Medicine initially concluded that Esmeralda Richiez's death was caused by a severe internal bleeding and hemorrhagic shock resulting from a perineal laceration. However, following a thorough autopsy, the final classification of her death was undetermined. What led to such a tragic event when Esmeralda was accompanied by friends and a supervising teacher? The investigation shed light on the events. Police interviews with Esmeralda's friends and a review of their phones revealed crucial clues, leading to the identification of a suspect. One of Esmeralda's friends, who had been with the teacher and Esmeralda that evening, provided a shocking testimony. She claimed to have seen the professor secretly add 5 pills to Esmeralda's drink while they were at the beach. The initial police findings sparked widespread speculation in the Dominican Republic, where abortion is illegal. Many theories emerged about the cause of Esmeralda's death, with some believing she died of a heart attack and others speculating that she bled to death due to abortion pills allegedly given to her by John Kelly. The medical examiner's report was expected to put an end to rumors and speculation. However, when the forensic examination results were released, speculation only ceased for a brief moment. Esmeralda's relatives were shocked and skeptical when they learned the results, which ruled out pregnancy. The family was unhappy with the report's conclusion because it contradicted their theory, which was supported by the investigation's findings and evidence. Previously, an examination of Esmeralda's friends' phones had uncovered numerous text messages hinting at the teacher's long-standing interest in the student, but these clues were indirect. After a failed pregnancy, an investigation found that John Kelly drugged a girl without her consent and violently assaulted her on the beach, causing severe blood loss. A few hours later, they, Esmeralda, died. Toxicology test results were still pending. Based on the evidence, the prosecutor's office requested that John Kelly Martinez and his alleged accomplice, Ruben Murillo Martinez, be detained, as they are the main suspects in Esmeralda's death. As a result, John Kelly Martinez was suspended from his teaching position for 90 days without pay due to the evidence against him. The prosecutor's office also requested that John Kelly be held in preventive detention for a year as the primary suspect in Esmeralda's death. To clarify, preventive detention is not a punishment for a crime, but rather a measure to prevent the person from committing further crimes while the investigation continues. New investigations, including fresh episodes and eyewitness interviews, have deepened the mystery surrounding the student's tragic death. Despite multiple stops during the journey to tend to her severe bleeding, neither the individuals assisting her nor the entire company took the crucial step of calling emergency services or rushing her to the hospital. Several stops made by the defendants were captured on surveillance cameras. Witnesses reported that they purchased alcohol and that Esmeralda and John went to the restroom together. They also visited a pharmacy to buy medication, water, and feminine hygiene products. It was later discovered that Esmeralda had to change her clothes completely at one of the stops because they were soaked in blood. After Esmeralda was dropped off at home, her parents noticed she was bleeding heavily. Assuming it was related to her menstrual cycle, her mother gave her a painkiller to help her fall asleep. One of Esmeralda's cell phones revealed that she had sent an audio message to a friend in the early morning hours, pleading for help and saying, "Please help me, I'm bleeding." Unfortunately, the friend didn't hear the message until it was too late. The next day, Esmeralda was found unresponsive on her bathroom floor, covered in blood. On February 14th, John Kelly Martinez was arrested, and his home was searched the following day. The clothes he wore on the night in question were seized during the search. Additionally, his cousin, Ruben Murillo, was accused of trying to hide John's bloody pants. The investigation into the event has been plagued by ambiguities. Rather than fueling speculation, the prosecutor's office should have provided clarity on the circumstances surrounding the young girl's death, which had alarmed the public and sparked demands for a thorough and high-quality investigation. Many people felt that the investigation had missed crucial evidence, including a thorough search of the teacher's home and car, which were potential crime scenes. The authorities quickly requested to examine the car, but John Kelly's wife sold it soon after, raising suspicions that she was trying to hide evidence. The car's new owner was Panaga Pillar. Only when the authorities threatened to take action against J.C. Espinal Rowe, John Kelly's wife, and Frank Panaga for their alleged involvement in the case did they finally inspect the car. Although they found traces of Esmeralda's blood, no other significant evidence was discovered. The court decided that there was not enough evidence to keep J.C. Espinal Rowe in jail, so she was released. The investigation continued for several months. The prosecutor reopened the case, re-interviewing the three girls who had been with Esmeralda that night. Their testimony helped investigators piece together the events of that night, minute by minute. At 7:30 p.m., John Kelly Martinez, 35, and his cousin Ruben Murillo Martinez went to Esmeralda's home in La Otra Banda Igay with the three girls in the passenger compartment of the car. John, posing as Esmeralda's teacher, coaxed her away from her mother, promising an exciting evening with her classmates. Initially, the plan was to take the group to an amusement park, but John changed his mind en route and chose a new destination. It's likely that John had no intention of going to the amusement park and instead opted for a quiet evening at Mile Beach. During the drive, John stopped at a store to buy a beer and asked his brother to move to the back seat, allowing Esmeralda to sit in the front. John had a thermos with him, which he filled with beer and secretly added 5 unknown pills. He offered the drink to Esmeralda without warning her about the pills, but one of her friends noticed this when they arrived at the beach. The 3 girls left the car, leaving Esmeralda alone with John. They spent about 30 minutes alone in the car, which didn't go unnoticed by Esmeralda's friends. Suddenly, John emerged and instructed everyone to get back in the car, claiming they needed to leave urgently. During their journey, they had to make multiple stops due to Esmeralda's heavy bleeding. One of these stops occurred at 9:45 when they pulled into a gas station parking lot. There, Esmeralda visited the restroom in the cafeteria, as confirmed by eyewitness accounts and CCTV footage. Esmeralda's classmate reported that she asked to stop at a gas station because she needed to use the restroom. When Esmeralda went in with her friends, they were shocked to see that her clothes were covered in blood. The restroom was also heavily blood-stained, requiring they to mop the floor. They were frightened and asked the gas station attendant if this was normal, and she told them it was not and that they needed to take Esmeralda to the doctor right away. They told John Kelly, Esmeralda's teacher, about the situation, but he refused to take her to the hospital, fearing he would be arrested. An investigation later confirmed that Esmeralda's blood was found in the parking lot and restroom at the gas station. Surveillance footage and a receipt also showed that they had stopped at a pharmacy to buy medical supplies, including sanitary pads, at 10:21 p.m. John Kelly eventually dropped Esmeralda off at her home around 11 p.m., but she was still heavily bleeding, having been left alone in the car with him. A subsequent medical report on February 16th revealed that Esmeralda had suffered severe and brutal abuse, resulting in massive blood loss and hypovolemic shock. While this condition could have been treated, Esmeralda never received the life-saving medical attention she needed that night. Esmeralda's toxicology report revealed the presence of a synthetic gestagen, a key ingredient in abortion pills. However, it had already been established that Esmeralda was not pregnant. This substance is taken orally as a contraceptive and works by suppressing ovulation and fertilization. Given its presence in her body, it's likely that John Kelly, her teacher, had planned to engage in intimate relations with her. After a series of medical examinations, Esmeralda's body was finally laid to rest at the Albano Public Cemetery. Her family and friends, including Malala, bid her a sad farewell, remembering her as a kind and cheerful person. Her devastated parents couldn't help but replay the fateful evening in their minds, blaming themselves for trusting John Kelly with their daughter's care and allowing her to go for a walk with him. On June 4, 2023, prosecutors charged John Kelly Martinez, a math and physical education teacher, in connection with the death of Esmeralda Richiez after reconstructing the last hours of her life. 8 days later, on June 12, 2023, the LA Alagia Prosecutor's Office filed an indictment and requested a trial against Martinez and his cousin, Rubiel Milo Martinez, in the LA Alagracia Instructional Court. The trial was initially scheduled for August 23, 2023, but was postponed due to Storm Franklin and rescheduled for November 24, 2023. However, the judge later ordered that John Kelly Martinez be retried as the sole defendant in Esmeralda Richiez's death. The new trial was initially set to begin on January 9, 2024, but was rescheduled again because only half of the witnesses showed up. The trial is now scheduled to take place on February 1st and 6th, 2024, before the Collegiate Court of the Penitentiary Chamber of First Instance of La Altagracia. The defense attorney argued that the prosecution's case relied too heavily on the idea that the victim's parents were responsible for her death, rather than focusing on the actions of the defendant. The prosecution, on the other hand, presented a significant amount of evidence, including witness statements, expert testimonies, and physical evidence, to build a strong case against the defendant. During the trial, the defendant attempted to portray himself as a victim, claiming that his interactions with the victim on the night of her death were consensual. When Professor John Kelly Martinez brought Esmeralda home, she was alive and in good health. However, the court documents reveal that Martinez voluntarily inflicted severe injuries on Esmeralda, including lacerations, abrasions, and contusions, which ultimately led to her death due to acute internal and external bleeding and hemorrhagic shock, as confirmed by the autopsy report. Despite Martinez's statement in court, it had no impact on the judges or the audience. On March 14, 2024, Martinez, 36, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for violent conduct. He will serve his sentence at the Anamuya Correctional and Rehabilitation Center. Additionally, Rubiel Mauro Martinez, the defendant's cousin and an accessory after the fact, was given a conditional enforcement measure requiring him to make regular court appearances in Hayward. Following the enforcement measures against Martinez and his cousin, the family's attorney, Raimundo Rosario, expressed satisfaction with the outcome and stated that the family would not pursue further investigation. Esmeralda's mother, Isabel Martinez, regretfully recalled allowing her daughter to walk with the teacher and 3 friends. She had previously spoken to the teacher on the phone, asking if he was a teacher, and he had confirmed that he was. She had trusted him to take care of her daughter, not knowing that he was a danger to her. The Ministry of Education offered support to the families of the deceased girl and the other girls who were with her on the day of the tragedy. They expressed hope that such cases would not happen again in the education community or in society. For the grieving parents, their fight for justice had just begun. A fun evening outing that included a beach visit had turned into a night of terror, resulting in the tragic death of Esmeralda Richiez, who suffered fatal injuries at the hands of the man entrusted with the care of children. Everyone involved in the evening's events bears some responsibility for what happened. Marala, however, was too afraid to confide in her parents due to their extreme strictness. We've all been there, afraid to speak up because we fear punishment or being misunderstood. But in this tragic case, fear triumphed, resulting in the devastating loss of a precious life. The case of Carol Maltese. Carol Nicole Maltese was born on September 19, 1995, in a small province in Italy. She was the only child of Fabio and Josephine and had a mix of Italian and Dutch heritage. When Carol was just 4 years old, her parents got divorced, and she stayed with her mother. Her father moved back to the Netherlands, got remarried, and had more children. Carol's mother, Josephine, chose to stay in Italy and raise her daughter on her own. Despite her former husband's lack of support, Josephine worked multiple jobs to give Carol a good education and a better life. Carol grew up to be a kind, sociable, and beautiful girl with many friends. She was active in sports, particularly horseback riding, and loved to dance. She was fluent in 3 languages, enjoyed traveling across Europe, reading, and could talk about almost any subject. As a teenager, Carol became a stunning beauty with a slim figure, and she loved being the center of attention. After finishing school, Carol went on to study industrial design, arts, and fashion at a technical university. She quickly became one of the top students in her class. Carol began dating a young man, a year older, and studying architecture and design during her freshman year. When she was 20, she discovered she was pregnant, which came as a shock to both her and the father. Despite being unprepared, Carol decided to keep the baby. In 2016, Carol gave birth to a son, and she and the father were forced to drop out of school due to financial constraints. They moved to Verona for better job opportunities to support their family. Carol landed a job as a sales consultant at a cosmetics and perfume retail chain when her son turned 1, while her partner worked from home and took care of their child. In mid-2019, Carol started an affair with Angelo, secretly meeting him in hotel rooms and exchanging messages at night. However, just before the new year, the father of her child discovered her infidelity and ended their relationship. Carol thought it was for the best to leave since she was already planning to move in with her new boyfriend. However, a complication came up. Angelo still lived with his parents, and it wasn't possible for Carol to move in there with her child from a previous relationship. So, they made the decision to rent a place together instead. When the economic crisis hit, they lost their jobs and couldn't afford their apartment. Carol moved in with her new boyfriend's parents and made the difficult decision to leave her 4-year-old son with his biological father until things got better and she could bring him to live with her. As the economic crisis worsened, a self-isolation regime was put in place, and everyone was forced to stay at home. Carol struggled financially during this time and relied on Angelo and his parents for support, unable to contribute financially to her son's care. To make matters worse, Carol's mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which required expensive therapy. With no other options, Carol desperately sought ways to earn money from home to support her son and ill mother. She turned to social media and YouTube, sharing her experiences of living in isolation and the challenges she faced in an effort to generate an income during the lockdown. Carol's early blog posts didn't gain much traction, but her attractive appearance caught readers' attention. She received flattering comments as well as some inappropriate proposals. One subscriber suggested she join OnlyFans, a platform where her looks would be in high demand, and she could quickly become a star and earn a lot of money. Taking this advice, Carol created an account under the pseudonym Charlotte Angel and began posting provocative photos and short videos. She quickly gained a large following of paying customers. While Carol's earnings increased, she kept her new career a secret from her boyfriend and close family members. As time passed, Carol's content became more explicit and sophisticated as she worked to satisfy her fans. She herself found enjoyment in this line of work. However, Carol was able to keep her secret hidden for only about 6 months before someone she knew discovered her account. The news spread quickly, and soon everyone knew how she was making a living. Carol's friends and family in Italy didn't understand her decision to work in the adult film industry. They saw it as immoral and were embarrassed to be associated with her. Carol, on the other hand, was confident that her work was a form of art that could bring her success, wealth, and fame. As she became more popular, adult film studios and directors approached her with offers to star in their films, which she accepted. She started participating in group shoots and public performances, but her boyfriend Angelo was still in the dark, thinking she was working remotely as a designer. However, when Angelo finally found out the truth, he was shocked and unsure of what to do. But when his parents discovered Carol's profession, they demanded that he break up with her immediately, fearing that she would bring shame to their family. Carol's OnlyFans account had become extremely successful, earning her enough money to rent her own place and attracting offers from directors. Her fees continued to rise, and she professed in interviews that this was not a long-term career goal. Instead, she planned to eventually complete her education and pursue a career in design or modeling. For now, she was enjoying her work and was well compensated. Despite her success, Carol frequently spoke about the constant moral pressure she faced from others. Their judgments and attempts to shame her led to feelings of anxiety and guilt. However, she defended her work as a form of art and believed that every woman should have the freedom to choose her profession without fear of judgment. Carol started anew in Rescaldina, Milan province, leaving her adult film career behind and working as a sales consultant at a perfume boutique. However, this fresh start was short-lived. She met David Fontana, a 42-year-old banker and nude photographer online. He was seeking a model, and Carol responded, feeling an instant attraction during their first meeting. Despite being married, Fontana pursued a relationship with Carol, and they began dating, combining photo shoots with intimacy. Fontana learned about Carol's past and encouraged her to return to filmmaking, recognizing her talent. He had complex feelings for her, loving and possessive, yet also enjoying seeing her in adult films. After divorcing his wife in March 2021, Fontana moved in with Carol, and they explored their explicit fantasies together. He assisted her in creating popular content on OnlyFans, taking a share of the profits from their joint ventures. Carol's success in the adult film industry led to her receiving lucrative contract offers from foreign directors and studios. However, her boyfriend Fontana became jealous and reacted angrily when others showed interest in her. Months later, Angelo, who was still in love with Carol, reached out to her and confessed his feelings. He proposed that they get back together, promising not to interfere with her work. Carol was touched by his words but revealed that she was already in a relationship with someone else, David. Despite this, Carol and Angelo continued to stay in touch. However, when David found out about their communication, he became furious and threatened Angelo. He even went as far as setting Angelo's car on fire. Angelo reported the threats and property damage to the police, and a restraining order was issued against David. However, there was no evidence to link David to the arson, so he didn't have to pay for the damages. As Carol's popularity grew, she traveled frequently for shoots and gained over 30,000 followers. She was saving money to buy a home, take her son with her, and eventually leave the adult film industry to focus on raising him and finding a new job. Meanwhile, she started creating custom videos, which became a profitable venture. Carol received scripts from fans who paid her to bring their fantasies to life. She continued to work with Fontana on filming and editing, and they shared the profits and lived together. In September 2021, she met Salvatore Galdo, an actor, on a film set, and they started working together on explicit films. As they worked together, Carol and Galdo developed real feelings for each other, and they began a romantic relationship in secret, afraid of how David, her current partner, might react. She waited for the right moment to tell David everything and end their relationship. A few months later, Galdo proposed to Carol with an engagement ring, and she happily accepted. By the end of the year, she had saved enough money to buy her own home. Carol planned to take her son, Mary, with her and decided it was time to talk to Fontana about her decision. Fontana took the news surprisingly well, understanding that Carol was moving on to her new partner. However, they still had unfinished projects that they had already been paid for, so they agreed to complete the work and then go their separate ways. Carol's sudden and mysterious disappearance in 2022, similar to Carol's earlier vanishing act, left everyone stunned. She abruptly stopped acting in films, discontinued her online streams, and ceased communication with colleagues. Moreover, she refused to accept new project offers from directors. Although many people were aware that Carol had planned to leave the entertainment industry, her complete disappearance still came as a surprise. Carol's friends and husband, Salvatore, grew concerned when she stopped responding to their calls. Despite her reassurances via social media, they sensed something was amiss. Months passed, and Carol's occasional social media posts revealed she'd gone on a seaside vacation without telling anyone. Her brief, curt responses only added to their unease. On March 20, 2022, a passerby discovered large black trash bags near a rocky cliff in the Italian community of Borno. Upon approach, the passerby found human fingers poking through the torn polyethylene. He immediately reported the gruesome find to the police, who discovered 4 bags containing a human body divided into 18 parts. The remains were so disfigured that identification seemed impossible. Forensic experts determined the young woman had died at least 2 months prior, but the cause of death remained unknown. It was clear the body had been stored in a freezer before being dumped, likely to keep it hidden. The criminal had removed distinctive features, tattoos, and skin pieces, then burned, cut, and doused the skin in acid to conceal the tattoos. Despite this, investigators pieced together tattoo fragments and matched them to a missing persons database. A news report about the body led a woman from the adult film industry to recognize the tattoos as belonging to a missing colleague, Charlotte. This information allowed law enforcement to identify Carol, who had become engaged to her coworker, Salvatore Galdo, before her disappearance. What's curious is that he didn't report her missing. Salvatore became the prime suspect, but his distraught reaction and conversation history with Carol seemed genuine. However, his story didn't add up, leading to another suspect, David, being questioned. David showed up at the police station to report Carol missing, oblivious to the recent discovery. His nervous, contradictory story eventually led to his confession. He had accidentally killed Carol. David Fontana claimed to be filming a scenario for a client who had paid a large sum of money. The script involved binding a woman, taping her mouth shut, covering her head with a bag, and brutally beating her with various tools, including a hammer. David was supposed to pretend to inflict severe pain without actually harming her. However, he allegedly went too far and struck her with a hammer, fracturing her skull. Instead of calling for help, he ended her suffering with another blow. Panicked, he dismembered the body and stored it in his freezer for over 2 months before deciding to dispose of it. The investigation revealed that David was the mysterious client who had orchestrated the entire scenario to exact revenge on the woman, Carol, who had decided to leave him. During the torture session, he extracted her phone password, which was supposedly part of the script. On January 11th, David fatally struck Carol with a hammer and used her credit card to buy a freezer, saw, and axe to dismember her body. He disfigured the body to prevent identification and stored the parts in the freezer for over 2 months. During this time, he communicated with Carol's relatives and friends on her behalf, creating the illusion that she was alive. By the end of March, David decided to dispose of the body by dumping it off a cliff. However, the remains were discovered 2 days later, and authorities tracked him down within a week. At the trial, David expressed remorse and claimed that he loved Carol and had taken her life unintentionally. Despite his claims, the court found David guilty of manslaughter and sentenced him to 30 years in prison, ordering him to pay compensation to Carol's son, mother, and the father of her child. Surprisingly, the dismemberment of the body was not considered an aggravating factor, making David potentially eligible for parole. The case of Catherine Wells Burr. Catherine Wells Burr was born in 1989 in the United Kingdom to parents Phil and Jane Wells Burr. She had an older sister named Lynn. During her 2010 university break, Catherine met Rafal Novak, a 31-year-old employee, on a new vacuum cleaner production line. Rafal, a tall, handsome blonde from Poland, caught her attention. He had moved to England about 4 years earlier, leaving behind a former wife and son. Catherine and Rafal started dating, initially meeting for lunch at the production site's cafe. However, their lunches soon turned into romantic dinners. Rafal wooed Catherine with thoughtful gestures, such as giving her beautiful bouquets, taking her to movies, and going on walks together. As they grew closer, Rafal opened up to Catherine about his past life and his reasons for moving to the UK. Catherine's trusting nature led her to open up completely to the blonde man, Rafal Novak. Their relationship accelerated rapidly, and within a few months, she introduced him to her parents, who warmly welcomed him into the family and hoped for their future happiness together. As their relationship blossomed, the couple began planning their wedding, which was set to take place in 2011. After graduating with honors from Bath Spa University, Catherine secured a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the manufacturer of Henry vacuum cleaners. She quickly excelled in her career, generating job opportunities for her parents and sister. Catherine's exceptional qualities, including her intelligence, education, and people skills, made her a remarkable leader. She was empathetic towards her colleagues, always willing to lend a helping hand, and her kind gaze and radiant smile earned her the respect and admiration of those around her. As Catherine's career soared, her substantial earnings, combined with Rafal's, enabled them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace on Willow Way. Catherine and Raphael, a young couple with successful careers, bought a house with a mortgage and secured insurance coverage through their agreement with the bank. They seemed to have everything they needed for happiness. However, their lives took a dramatic turn on September 12, 2012, a day that would be a turning point in their lives. As the investigation into their lives progressed, new and surprising facts came to light. These revelations slowly exposed the deception that had been present in their relationship from the beginning. It turned out that Raphael, 29, had fled Poland to escape significant debts, leaving behind a wife and child. He moved to the UK, where he began a relationship with Anna Lovich in 2008. Later, he met Catherine Wellsbur, and for a time, he saw both women. Ultimately, he chose Catherine, seeing her as a more suitable partner for building a family and achieving financial stability. Catherine had genuine dreams of a happy marriage with the man she loved and starting a family. However, Novak, her partner, was secretly planning to murder her. He intended to use the life insurance payout and inherit their large house, which Catherine had partially paid for. On the day Catherine disappeared, Novak waited a few hours before approaching her boss, pretending to be worried and distraught. He acted convincingly, deceiving her colleagues and relatives. When Catherine could not be found at her parents' home or her own, and her car was missing, Novak fabricated a story about her receiving threatening letters from a mentally unstable admirer. Her family then contacted the police. The family gathered in the young couple's living room, waiting for Catherine's return, when they received devastating news. A burning car with a body inside had been found. Raphael described the evening before her disappearance as uneventful, saying they went for a walk, bought groceries, had dinner, and watched TV together before bedtime. Catherine seemed normal and not frightened or distressed. However, further investigation revealed that Catherine's death occurred earlier than initially thought. She was strangled around 2 a.m. while sleeping in her own bed. Her body was then placed in the car, driven a short distance from the house, and set on fire to destroy evidence. Despite this, Raphael had a solid alibi, claiming he was at work from 5:30 a.m. and Catherine was still in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m., but a crucial detail emerged. Raphael was still at home at 1:30 a.m., significantly changing the direction of the case. As a result, Raphael Novak became the prime suspect in Catherine Wellsbur's murder. Evidence mounted against him, and he was detained for further investigation. Raphael claimed Catherine was being stalked by someone who had sent her threatening letters and driven her to hysteria. During the investigation, proof of Catherine's secret online life was uncovered, revealing accounts on adult websites and intimate exchanges with men that her loved ones knew nothing about. A letter from a secret admirer was also found, but despite attempts to hide the truth, the evidence ultimately came to light. Raphael tried to mislead the investigation, but he made a critical mistake by not destroying key evidence that linked him directly to Catherine's death. This oversight gave the prosecution a motive to pursue. Examination of Novak's phone revealed that he had ongoing communication and meetings with Anna Lovich over the past few months. Further investigation revealed that Raphael also had a financial motive. Shortly before Catherine's death, they had taken out life insurance policies worth £123,000, with each other as the sole beneficiaries. The significant life insurance payout emerged as the primary motive behind Catherine's murder and the arson of her car, which was intended to throw off the investigation. On the day Catherine disappeared, police found a message on Anna Lovich's phone from Catherine. They also discovered that Anna and her uncle had filled a gas canister at a gas station a few days before the crime. This led them to suspect Anna and her uncle, Todd Dmitry Shin, of being involved in Catherine's disappearance and trying to cover their tracks with arson. The investigation revealed that Anna, her uncle, and a third person had planned the crime meticulously over several months. They created fake accounts on pornographic websites, uploaded doctored photos of Catherine, and fabricated conversations with men to mislead the investigation. However, when confronted with the evidence, Anna and her uncle eventually cracked and started pointing fingers at each other. Anna accused Novak of killing someone for insurance money, while Novak claimed Anna did it out of jealousy towards a rival. The true culprits crafted a deceitful narrative around an innocent young woman, Catherine. They created fake online profiles for her, suggesting she was looking for casual sexual encounters. To cover their tracks, the conspirators went to great lengths to mislead investigators. They set Catherine's body on fire and fabricated a fake history for her, portraying her as a secretive and promiscuous person with many desires. They even created the illusion of a mysterious lover who might have killed her. One of them sent a text from Catherine's phone at 5:17 a.m. on the day she died, implying she was on her way to meet this fictional person. When forensic experts investigated the car fire, they found that Catherine was wearing her favorite nightgown, not the outfit she would have worn to meet a man, as she had claimed. This discovery led them to suspect that she was attacked in her own home rather than in the car. The police also found that a pillow was missing from her bed, and the remaining pillowcase had been recently washed and hung to dry. Further investigation revealed a SIM card in Anna Lovi's trash bin that was linked to the phone number Catherine had supposedly used to send texts that morning. Additionally, detectives discovered notes written by Lovi, indicating that she was trying to come up with ideas for messages to make it seem like Catherine was communicating with a mysterious person. As the evidence against them mounted, Novak and Linovit changed their story, claiming that Catherine's death was actually the work of a hired hitman. However, just before the trial began, Lovi attempted to create a distraction by having a fellow inmate pass on a fake confession from a supposed hitman who claimed to have been paid £20,000 by Novak to kill Catherine. Rafal Novak's girlfriend Catherine was murdered, and a fictional story written by Vinovich sheds light on the gruesome details. The story claims that Catherine's body was found in the trunk of her car, and the killer, supposedly a hitman, helped Novak stage her death to look like a murder-suicide. According to the story, Novak placed Catherine's body in the driver's seat, removed the tape from her mouth, put on her shoes, buckled her seatbelt, and kissed her goodbye before setting the car on fire. In reality, Novak played the role of a grieving boyfriend to perfection, even convincing Catherine's mother, Jane, of his innocence. He told her that Catherine was receiving threatening messages from an ex-boyfriend and that she had spoken of taking her own life. Novak's act was so convincing that Catherine's parents comforted him, unaware that he was responsible for their daughter's death. In fact, Catherine's mother even hugged Novak after her death and allowed him to call her mom. She said that after the police told her in the early days of the investigation that he was seen more as a witness than a suspect, she decided to offer him all the support possible. "I thought if Catherine loved him that much, and he was part of our family, then he deserved to come back." The lengthy trial commenced under the chairmanship of Justice Sharp. The three defendants stood to gain a significant sum of money and property from Catherine Wells-Burr's death. They had planned to receive a £123,000 life insurance payout and take ownership of her two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000. During the trial, it was revealed that Rafal Novak showed no emotional response when the police found Catherine's body in her burned-out car on September 12th. Meanwhile, Anna Lagvinovich frequently shook her head and laughed during the proceedings, implying that Novak was responsible for the crime. However, she refused to testify in her own defense. Dmitry Sheen also chose not to take the stand. According to reports, Judge Justice Sharp delivered a scathing rebuke to the defendants, in which she characterized the murder as a terrible, merciless crime that had been cold-bloodedly committed with a gross breach of trust. Furthermore, it was reported that during sentencing, none of the three defendants displayed any emotion. Judge Sharp imposed mandatory life sentences on the three Polish nationals, with a minimum of 32 years in prison and no possibility of early release. According to Judge Sharp, the defendants had taken the life of a beautiful young woman who had everything to live for, solely for financial gain. Judge Sharp specifically rebuked Rafal Novak, saying, "The photos of you holding Catherine's hand the evening before her death and buying groceries for what you knew was her last dinner are utterly chilling. Your emotions were directed only at yourself." Turning to Anna Lagvinovich, Judge Sharp declared, "Your behavior was deceitful, manipulative, and cruel. You played your full part in this horrendous crime." The judge addressed Dmitry, stating that the murder was driven by financial gain, with aggravating circumstances and no mitigating factors. The judge emphasized that the only sympathy should be reserved for Catherine's family, including her mother Jane, father Philip, and sister Lynn, who have suffered greatly. The judge expressed deep condolences to Catherine's parents, noting that they were deceived by Rafal Novak's facade, unaware of his true nature, which was devoid of remorse and decency. The judge reiterated that the crime was motivated by greed, as Novak and Catherine had no personal ties, being neither married nor having children together. In contrast, the case of Anna Lavinovich was driven by jealousy and a desire for revenge. At the request of the parents, Judge Justice Sharp read statements from Catherine's mother and sister. Catherine's mother was overcome with emotion in the courtroom as her statement was read, describing her daughter as a caring, loving, sincere, generous, loyal, thoughtful, exceptional, and amazing young woman. "My daughter had a bright and promising future with unlimited potential." As her parents, Phil and I couldn't help but feel immense pride in the young woman she was becoming. However, our lives were forever changed by the cruel and calculated act that took Catherine's life away from us. The hatred shown to her is something that will haunt us for the rest of our lives. I'm left with the unbearable pain of never having had the chance to say goodbye, to tell her how much I love her, or to hear her say, "I love you, Mommy," one last time. Catherine Wellsbur's father, Philip, was outraged that his daughter's boyfriend, Rafal Novak, had betrayed their trust. Novak had been living with them and was like a son, but he was accused of murdering Catherine. Despite his innocent claims, Novak showed no emotion when Catherine's body was found, and initially didn't mention her when questioned by police. Instead, he asked for a steak dinner. Catherine's mother, Jane Wells-Burr, testified that she had concerns about Novak when he and Catherine bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy. She believed Catherine's life was in danger and that she had signed her own death warrant by signing the mortgage. In the end, the jury found Novak guilty of murdering Catherine by suffocating her with a pillow while she slept. He had planned the murder with his secret lover, Anna Lagvinovich, and her uncle, Tavush Dmitry Shine, to claim a life insurance payout of £123,000 and a share of the house. Vinovich and Sheen helped dispose of the body by transporting it in Vinovich's car to a remote location where they set it on fire. Meanwhile, Novak had already started his workday, providing himself with an alibi. The three Polish nationals were found guilty of the crime by the Royal Court of Bristol. The events leading up to the murder involved secret meetings and phone calls between Novak and Vinovich, who were unaware that Catherine was involved in a love triangle. To mislead detectives, they created fake online profiles for Catherine on adult websites and sent her messages from a supposed mysterious admirer. Catherine's parents have called for stricter immigration controls following her death. They believe that if the UK had immigration rules as strict as those in the US, Novak, who was convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland, would not have been allowed into the country. The couple blames the European Union for the current lax entry measures for foreign nationals. Jane Wells-Burr emphasized that people entering the UK are not properly vetted, pointing out that they were unaware of Novak's previous assault charge in Poland. Catherine's family members broke down in tears as the sentence was handed down in court, while the three convicted perpetrators remained emotionless. The trio received life sentences with no possibility of parole. In essence, the three immigrants from Poland had exchanged their aspirations for a successful and wealthy life for a lifetime of imprisonment due to their own actions. Following the verdict, Catherine's mother delivered a heartfelt tribute to her daughter, describing her as a beautiful girl, absolutely beautiful. She recalled her daughter's accomplishments and remembered her as determined, hardworking, and full of potential for a happy life. The case of Michelle Young. Michelle Marie Young, born in February 1977 in New York, grew up with her younger sister Meredith, with whom she was extremely close. Their mother, Linda, devoted significant time to her daughters, encouraging their development and nurturing their talents. Michelle was drawn to law and economics from an early age, hoping to pursue a career in these fields. After high school, she applied to several universities and was accepted into a prominent institution in North Carolina's capital. At the university, Michelle excelled in her economics and law studies, earning a master's degree. Upon graduation, she landed a prestigious position at a leading accounting firm in the state. Michelle's career flourished, earning a good income and making ambitious plans for her future. To celebrate her 24th birthday, she gathered with friends and colleagues at a popular local venue. During the celebration, a stranger accidentally knocked a cocktail out of Michelle's hands. The apologetic stranger, Jason Young, offered to buy her another drink. As they conversed, Jason's charming and witty nature caught Michelle's attention. He asked her out on a date, and Michelle, feeling a spark, accepted, believing their encounter was meant to be. After they started talking, they discovered they had a lot in common. Both had attended the same university, with Jason graduating 3 years earlier. They shared a love for the same hockey team and music group. Their mutual interests quickly blossomed into a romantic relationship, but living together or getting married was not an option at that point. Jason still lived with his parents in Brevard and would only visit Michelle in Raleigh on weekends or meet her during business trips to the state capital. During one of these visits, Michelle surprised Jason with the news that she was pregnant. This revelation shocked both of them, as they weren't ready to become parents. They were focused on their careers, making progress, and hadn't planned on starting a family yet. Jason immediately accepted the situation, but Michelle was unsure at first, eventually deciding to keep the baby and not have an abortion. It took Jason about a month to come to terms with the news, after which he relocated to Raleigh to be close to Michelle, who was now pregnant. A few months later, they got married, but not because of romantic feelings or the pregnancy itself. The real reason was that Michelle lacked health insurance, and having a child would have been extremely costly without it. Marriage provided a solution, allowing them to avoid these expenses. Michelle gave birth to her daughter, Cassidy Elizabeth, in the spring of 2004. As a newlywed, Michelle dedicated herself to domestic life and family responsibilities, with the help of her mother and younger sister. Although Michelle's family initially had reservations about Jason, they made an effort to avoid conflicts and accept him. Later that year, the Young family moved into a large house in a quiet, landscaped area of the city. During her visits, Michelle's mother, Linda, noticed that there was tension within the family. Jason had a volatile temper, and Michelle constantly worked to resolve their disputes and present a united front in public, pretending to be a happy wife and mother. Only her mother, Linda, knew the truth about their relationship. An ominous sign came when Cassidy was just 2 years old. Michelle became pregnant again. She tentatively shared the news with Jason, but he surprisingly reacted with calmness and even seemed happy about it. The family drove to Brevard to share the good news with Jason's parents. They visited for the weekend, celebrating with relatives on the first day. The next day, they left their young daughter with her grandparents for a few hours and went to a restaurant to celebrate together. On their way home, Jason, who was driving, overcorrected and oversteered, causing the car to go off the road and into a ravine. Although they were shaken and had some scrapes and bruises, they were not seriously injured. However, the shock of the accident caused Michelle to miscarry, which left her deeply worried. Jason's calm reaction to the accident, the loss of their child, and his apparent indifference to his wife's distress seemed suspicious. In hindsight, Linda Fisher would later consider the accident a bad omen that they had ignored at the time. They had a friend named Celeste Manno from their university days. After losing touch for a while, Jason ran into her during a work trip in the spring of 2006. He told his wife about the encounter, and they decided to invite Michelle over for a visit. Michelle accepted the invitation and opened up about her unhappy marriage and relationship issues. She constantly praised Jason, telling his wife how lucky she was to have him. Although Michelle noticed Michelle's flirting behavior, she genuinely wanted to comfort and support her friend. However, Jason saw this as an opportunity to take their friendship to the next level. He had always been flirtatious, but this time, his interactions with Michelle quickly escalated beyond friendly support. They started calling each other almost daily and secretly meeting up. Jason would justify his absence by saying he was on business trips, and his wife remained unaware of what was really going on. In the summer of 2006, Michelle told her husband Jason that she was pregnant again. However, this time, Jason was unhappy about the news. Michelle was confused and felt distant from her husband, but she attributed this to the miscarriage they had experienced a few months prior. Unbeknownst to Michelle, Jason was secretly contemplating how to end their marriage with minimal personal consequences. In early November, when Michelle was 5 months pregnant, Jason went on a business trip, driving 300 miles from home and booking a hotel room halfway through his journey. That evening, Michelle had a lengthy phone conversation with her best friend, discussing their marital problems and revealing that she had a significant argument with Jason the night before he left. After talking to her, she went upstairs, put her daughter to bed, and then fell asleep beside her around 10 p.m. Meanwhile, Jason arrived at the hotel, claiming he was exhausted from the journey, and went straight to his room to rest. However, his real intention was to carefully observe the hotel's entrances, exits, and security cameras, plotting how to sneak out and back in without being detected. He was working on creating a foolproof alibi for what he believed would be the perfect crime. In the early morning hours, Young called his sister-in-law, Meredith, for assistance. He explained that he wanted to surprise his wife, Michelle, with a piece of jewelry for their wedding anniversary, but he had accidentally sent the order confirmation to their home fax machine. He was worried that Michelle would see the surprise and asked Meredith to help him retrieve the fax. Meredith, despite her dislike for her son-in-law, agreed to help. When she arrived at Michelle's house, she entered through a secret door in the garage, which was always left unlocked and known only to family members. The house was eerily quiet, and Meredith found Michelle's personal belongings, including her papers, keys, and wallet, in the hallway, suggesting that she hadn't left the house. Meredith then went upstairs and called out to her sister and niece, but there was no response. As she entered the bedroom, Meredith was met with a horrific scene. Michelle lay lifeless on the floor, her skull severely fractured, surrounded by a pool of her own blood. The walls, furniture, and floor were covered in blood, with bloody footprints from the baby nearby. Sadly, Michelle had been dead for hours, and nothing could be done to help her. Cassidy's sister quickly called emergency services when she heard a strange noise coming from under the bed. When she looked, she saw Cassidy staring back at her in confusion. Despite being shaken, Cassidy was unharmed. It became clear that she had witnessed her mother's death and had stayed by her body for hours, as evidenced by the floor marks and the toys she had brought to her mother. Further investigation revealed that Michelle's body bore the signs of a brutal and prolonged beating, with numerous bruises, abrasions, and fractures. Her teeth had been knocked out, and her skull was fractured by a heavy, blunt object that was never recovered. A bloody pillow lay nearby, suggesting that the killer had used it to smother the victim. The lack of stolen items and absence of forced entry or broken locks suggested that the perpetrator's sole intention was murder, and that they must have had a key or known about the secret door, which was only known to family members. The main suspect in the case was the husband of the deceased, but he claimed to have a solid alibi. He said he checked into his hotel room in the evening and didn't leave until morning, when he attended a scheduled business meeting. An investigation confirmed that he used his room key card to enter and exit his room. However, further investigation revealed several inconsistencies. For instance, a hotel employee found that the emergency exit door had been propped open with a cobblestone to prevent it from slamming shut. The surveillance camera that monitored this door had been intentionally disabled on the night of the murder. In fact, it stopped recording around half an hour after the suspect checked into his room. Furthermore, a man resembling the suspect was seen getting gas at a station between the hotel and the crime scene. When asked to provide identification, he refused and quickly left the station without waiting for change. The gas station attendant later identified the suspect, but he continued to deny any involvement, claiming he had stayed in his hotel room all night. On the eve of the tragedy, Jason Young made over 24 calls to Michelle, followed by 5 brief calls to his mistress, each lasting no more than 15 seconds. This suggests that Jason may have been panicking. Notably, all these calls were made outside the hotel, despite his claim of having stayed there all night. Additionally, Jason was late for a scheduled business meeting with his partners and appeared confused. While these events are suspicious, they do not provide conclusive evidence, individually or collectively, to prove that Jason Young was responsible for the brutal murder of his pregnant wife. For nearly 3 years, Jason lived a normal life, even gaining custody of his young daughter, a devastating blow to his late wife's relatives. During this time, he began openly dating Mani, a friend of his deceased wife Michelle, which only fueled suspicion that he was responsible for her brutal murder. Jason was finally arrested in 2009, but the initial trial ended in a mistrial due to a hung jury, despite substantial evidence pointing to his guilt. However, the case was reopened in 2012 after new evidence emerged, including eyewitness testimony placing Jason near a hotel on the night of the murder. Crucial pieces of evidence included sightings of his distinctive white car parked near his home in a dark lot on the night of the crime. Additionally, a child psychologist testified about Jason's daughter Cassidy's disturbing doll play, in which she demonstrated her father hitting her mother, then not getting up off the floor. Mani testified in court, revealing that Jason had an affair with her, but claimed that Jason was miserable in his marriage, as he had told everyone. Another of Jason's former mistresses testified that she was frightened of his violent outbursts when he lost control. After a lengthy trial, Jason Young was found guilty of brutally assaulting his pregnant wife and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jason filed his first appeal in 2014, but it was denied. In 2018, he requested a review of his case, but the State Court of Appeals again denied it. Cassidy, the daughter of Jason's murdered wife, was left without her parents. Her father is in prison for the crime, and she is now being raised by her aunt and maternal grandparents. The case of Jake Wagner. Hannah Mae Roden, 13, met 18-year-old Edward Jake Wagner, and they became inseparable after he invited her to prom. While their love was palpable, their significant age difference raised concerns. Despite this, their parents did not intervene in their relationship. As time passed, the Roden and Wagner families grew close, often spending weekends and attending parties together. The young couple's love was carefree and passionate. When Hannah turned 15, she revealed her pregnancy, which thrilled Jake. He expected his family to be delighted with the news, as they valued tradition and family lineage. The Wagners saw the baby as a way to continue their family name, which was passed down through generations. In contrast, the Rodens had a more modest approach to family, but still prioritized their children. Hannah's parents, Christopher and Dana, remained devoted to their 3 kids despite their divorce. The Roden family's income was modest, unlike the Wagners. To celebrate Sophie's birthday, a grand party was organized shortly after. Jake proposed that Hannah move in with him and his family, claiming it would make life easier for both of them. However, Hannah refused, having come to realize that Jake was trying to control her and limit her independence. This was partly due to Jake's increasing aggression and suspicious behavior, which had already led to physical altercations on several occasions. Hannah's rejection sparked tension between the Wagners, with each of Sophie's parents determined to gain full custody of Sophie. Driven by their own interests, the families began to advocate for their own rights. Jake's anger towards Hannah peaked when she refused to sign a document granting him and his brother full custody. He even threatened her, accusing her of hiding secrets. The situation escalated when Hannah announced her second pregnancy. Although she claimed the child was fathered by another man, Jake was skeptical. In December 2015, he hacked into Hannah's social media accounts to uncover evidence of infidelity, but found none. Instead, he discovered her communication with Georgia Fort's former mother-in-law, which sparked his interest. A court case was soon to follow as a result. During a court hearing to decide where their granddaughter Sophie would live, Christopher Roden and George Wagner III got into a serious argument. This dispute marked the beginning of the end for the relationship between the two families. The Wagner family soon became convinced that Hannah, Sophie's mother, was an obstacle and that they needed to eliminate her and the entire Roden family, who could potentially gain custody of Sophie. This disturbing idea evolved into a sinister plan by Christmas 2016. While many people were celebrating the festive season with love and kindness, the Wagners held a chilling family vote to decide whether to carry out their plan. Every family member agreed to go ahead, and they began assigning roles and making preparations. Over the next 5 months, they secretly observed the Roden homes, studying their daily routines, work schedules, and surveillance cameras. On the night of April 21, 2016, George Wagner III visited Christopher Roden under the guise of offering him a job to improve his finances. This was just a ruse to get into the house. The next evening, around 8 p.m., Christopher Roden Sr. answered the door, unaware of the danger lurking. Earlier that day, Bobby Jo Manley, Dana Roden's sister, had stopped by Christopher's trailer to care for the family's animals, as she did daily since he had offered her a job. However, she noticed someone was inside, which was unusual at that time of day. Alarmed, she called emergency services, reporting what she saw and requesting help at 477 Union Hill Road. Panicked, Bobby rushed to the neighboring homes of relatives, loudly knocking on their doors. At one of the homes, she found a 3-year-old boy, Clarence's son, who didn't respond to her questions about his parents' whereabouts, only pointing towards the bed. Following the incident, the surviving children were placed in the care of relatives. The neighborhood was gripped by fear, and the police advised the Roden relatives to take precautions and warned all Pike residents to stay indoors at night. After a brutal mass murder shocked the state, the public demanded a swift and transparent investigation, urging authorities to catch the perpetrators as soon as possible. In response, businessman Jeff Ruby offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible. However, he later withdrew the offer. An investigative task force of at least 100 individuals was formed to work on the case. Following the funerals, investigators took possession of the slain family's 3 trailers and several vehicles, transporting them to a secure facility to preserve evidence and protect the victims' belongings. The plan was to return the family's cars and farming equipment to their relatives after the investigation. Forensic experts joined the inquiry, meticulously examining the trailers, but no suspect DNA was found. Although cameras had been installed in the mobile homes, they had been disabled, leaving no useful footage. The perpetrators had clearly planned every detail carefully. Just when it seemed like there were no significant leads, detectives made a breakthrough discovery. Cannabis crops were found at 3 crime scenes. In one location, police found around 200 cannabis plants, leading them to suspect the drugs were being grown for sale, not personal use. This raised questions about potential involvement with Mexican drug traffickers, but the amount of cannabis found was too small to imply involvement with an entire cartel. A relative of the Roden family was arrested for drug trafficking in January 2017, but this was considered a coincidence. Leonard Manley, the father of Dana Roden, denied his daughter's involvement in the cannabis operation, saying that they were trying to drag Dana through the mud, and he didn't like it. Some family members confirmed that Christopher and Kenneth Roden, the older brothers, grew marijuana, but they were unaware of any large-scale operation. The theory that a family feud over illegally obtained money was behind the murders was also disproven. At the Rodens' property, authorities discovered not only banned substances, but also specialized equipment used for breeding fighting chickens and cages containing animals trained for combat. Although these findings initially led investigators to suspect illegal animal fights might be connected to the homicide, it soon became apparent that this was not the case. Despite months of investigation, the true motive behind the crime remained a mystery. By April 13, 2017, local authorities officially announced that they lacked sufficient evidence to make any arrests. However, prosecutor Rob Young insisted that the investigation was still active, implying that they had some promising leads that they were not yet ready to reveal. As the second anniversary of the mass crime approached, the case received little attention from the local media, and neither the sheriff nor the prosecutor attended the memorial service, leading the community to suspect that the investigation had stalled. On May 12, 2017, a surprising turn of events occurred when a SWAT team raided a home in Pike County, just 10 miles from the scene of the crime. Initially, they were looking for suspects, but it was later revealed that their true intention was to gather evidence. Additionally, detectives searched a house in Adams County that had previously belonged to Jake Wagner, although he had already sold it by that time. Approximately a month later, on June 20, 2017, the focus of the investigation officially shifted towards the Wagner family. 26-year-old Jake, 27-year-old George III, 47-year-old George IV, and 48-year-old Angela, who lived 15 miles from the victims, were under scrutiny. The Wagners had moved to Alaska, citing difficulties staying in the area, claiming to have loved the Roden family and stating their deaths caused them immense suffering. Rob Young's words from a year earlier proved true, as the investigation had made a breakthrough and was now seeking information from the public on the Wagners' discussions about firearms, ammunition, vehicles, etc. 2 years prior, it wasn't long before the suspects, running low on funds, returned to Ohio, where detectives had gathered enough evidence for arrests, including proving Jake had hacked into Hannah's account during the examination of the Wagner family's devices. Search queries related to guardianship were discovered. It was also found that Angela had purchased sneakers for the entire family just a few weeks before the crime. The tread pattern of one of these matched that found in one of the trailers. Officers believed Angela was the mastermind behind the horrific scheme, with Jake as the primary executive. According to the investigation, each family member was involved in the criminal act. On November 13, 2018, the Attorney General announced the arrest of the Wagner couple, as well as their sons, who were charged with planning and carrying out the termination of life. Rita Newcomb, Angela's 65-year-old mother, and Frida Wagner, George III's mother, were arrested and charged with perjury and obstructing justice. In 2019, Rita Newcomb underwent handwriting analysis, which proved her involvement in forging a document related to Sophie's guardianship. She struck a plea deal to avoid imprisonment. The charges against Freda Wagner were later dropped in June 2019. The other Wagners refused to cooperate with the investigation and denied any involvement in the Rodens' deaths, expressing sorrow and wishing for the real perpetrators to be caught. However, in April 2021, 5 years after the incident, Jake Wagner decided to make a deal with the prosecution. Under the agreement, he would provide details of the crime in exchange for life sentences for all family members instead of the death penalty. Jake Wagner Jr. admitted to killing 5 people and pleaded guilty to 23 criminal charges, including aggravated murder, burglary, conspiracy, and other crimes. To ensure his daughter Hannah wouldn't be taken away, he thought killing her mother was the only solution. He believed that if he didn't also kill the Rodens, they would seek revenge and fight for custody of Hannah. Angela, who had been involved in the conspiracy, pleaded guilty to several charges on September 10th, including conspiracy, robbery, and evidence tampering. In exchange for her cooperation, the charge of murder was dropped. She received a 30-year prison sentence. George Wagner IV went on trial on August 28, 2022. Despite denying any involvement in the crimes, claiming he was unaware of what was happening, the prosecution presented evidence of his role in planning, executing, and covering up the crimes. He was found guilty on 22 counts and sentenced to life in prison without parole. George Wagner III's trial is set for February 2024. Despite his family members being convicted, he still maintains his innocence, but likely faces the same fate as his son. The once peaceful relationship between the Wagners and Rodens ended in tragedy, driven by a collective and incomprehensible madness. The consequences of their actions left 3 children without parents. As Sophie grows up, she will one day realize what happened, and it's hard to imagine how she will cope with that knowledge. The Wagners' bitter custody battle had a devastating impact on her, denying her the love and support of her parents, relatives, and a stable upbringing. The case of Diana Maria Kerr Lopez Pinel. Diana Maria Kerr Lopez Pinel, born on August 12, 1998, in Madrid, came from a wealthy and close-knit family. Her parents, Diana Cristina Lopez Pinel and Juan Carlos, had a sister named Valeria. However, their family life was disrupted in 2013 when her parents divorced, leading to depression and competition between the sisters for their mother's attention. Despite the divorce, their father remained involved in their lives and would visit them regularly during vacations. Diana, her mother, and sister often spent their summers in the small coastal town of Poder do Carmo, which had a population of around 10,000. In the summer of 2016, they returned to their favorite vacation spot, Alba do Carmo, to enjoy the peace and beauty of the area. On the evening of August 21st, Diana told her mother that she was going to meet her friends at Valentin Park to celebrate the Feast of the Virgin Carmen. It seemed like it would be just another typical summer evening. Diana regularly walked in Valentin Park, which was close to her family's cottage. Her mother saw no problem with this and let her go there again. That evening, Diana had a good time with her friends, unaware that it would be their last encounter. After saying goodbye to her friends, she met Paso Diana Ariel, an acquaintance, near a pizzeria she often visited. They parted ways around 2:30 a.m., making Paso Diana Ariel the last person to see Diana that night. The morning of August 22, 2016, was a nightmare for Diana's mother, Maria Kerr Lopez Pinel. When Diana didn't return from a party, her mother became alarmed. The girl's phone was off or out of range, and her prolonged absence was unusual. Based on the information Diana's mother provided, it seemed that Diana didn't have any significant emotional or mental health issues, despite experiencing her parents' divorce. Maria immediately reported her daughter missing to the police at 8:30 a.m. Police investigated the mysterious disappearance of Diana Maria Care Lopez Pinel. Diana, also known as Diana, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only cryptic clues. The last messages she sent were to a friend in Madrid via WhatsApp, in which she described being stalked by a stranger who would shout strange phrases, frightening her. These messages were her final contact with the outside world. To retrace Diana's steps, the police searched the road she would have taken to get home. Along the way, they found a black hairband, similar to the one Diana wore that night. Unfortunately, it was the only clue found at the scene of her disappearance. Investigators had no other leads, despite questioning Diana's friends, who couldn't provide any helpful information. The lack of CCTV cameras on the last part of Diana's journey made it even more challenging. The dimly lit and deserted street had few landmarks, including some garages and a rundown Boomerang nightclub. Some witnesses reported seeing Diana exit a car with 3 men, then get into another car that drove her away from the port. However, these accounts were not corroborated. Investigators explored 2 main theories. First, that Diana was kidnapped by someone she knew, and second, that she was attacked by a stranger. Diana's mother even proposed a third possibility, that her daughter was taken away on a boat. Diana's friend and ex-boyfriend claimed that she met a man from Morocco and they purchased hashish together. However, this information only added to the mystery of her disappearance. The media reported that the clothes Diana wore that evening were found, but her mother denied this, stating that no such discovery was made. Furthermore, Diana left her credit card and identification behind, which suggested that she did not intentionally run away. This, along with other circumstances, indicated that her disappearance was not voluntary. Diana's disappearance remained a mystery despite efforts to solve it. The media soon revealed that Diana had argued with her mother just before she vanished, which led to reports of Diana having a nervous breakdown and requiring medical attention. Her younger sister Valeria, 16, was also hospitalized with similar symptoms. To avoid further conflict and litigation, the father was granted custody of Valeria. This decision was made on September 1st to prevent more tension in the community, which was already on edge due to Diana's disappearance. The father and daughter left town, fueling rumors that they were hiding something important. According to Diana's friends, it was not unusual for the sisters to run away from home, especially Valeria. The family had complicated relationships with frequent quarrels between the mother and daughters. Diana's mother was criticized for being overly anxious when Diana failed to return home, considering Diana had often left home on Wednesdays without incident. However, the family's actions raised suspicions when they canceled a scheduled press interview, citing emotional distress at the possibility of never seeing their daughter again. New information emerged on September 11th, contradicting the mother's claim that Diana didn't have mental health issues. It was revealed that Diana had gone missing for 3 days in April, and her mother had not reported it to the police. Diana would often turn off her phone to upset her mother, and had expressed a desire to no longer live with her. The letters exchanged between Diana and Valeria, published in the press, revealed that both sisters struggled with serious emotional issues. Valeria's problems were severe enough to land her in the hospital multiple times in the past year, including an incident where she had to have her stomach pumped due to a prescription drug overdose. With the investigation into Diana's disappearance stalled, prosecutors have shifted their focus to investigate the alleged abuse of Valeria, the youngest daughter of the Lopez Panel family. Meanwhile, the search for Diana continues at full speed, with investigators working intensively to uncover the truth about her disappearance. Forensic experts analyzed various items belonging to Diana, including her toothbrush, comb, computer, diary, and prescription drugs, but found no leads. They also questioned her acquaintances, such as a Moroccan man she had a brief relationship with, but, again, no conclusive results. Despite extensive searches in the surrounding areas, the investigation remained stagnant. The search efforts focused on the mountains, forests, rivers, and lakes near the disappearance site, but Diana's phone signal was last detected in the Tarragone area, 13 miles away from her family's location, around 3 a.m. on the night of her disappearance. 72 days passed with no resolution, and all leads remained unconfirmed. However, the police did find a phone matching Diana's, which her father confirmed belonged to her. In a surprising twist, Diana's Facebook profile was activated 2 months after her disappearance, prompting friends and relatives to notify the police and provide screenshots. The Remind Password function had been used to bypass entering profile login details, leading to 2 possible explanations. Diana might have forgotten her password, or an attacker was attempting to access her profile. Unfortunately, Diana's phone, which could have held crucial clues, failed to provide any insights into her mysterious disappearance. On November 10, 2006, investigators finally identified the driver of the car in which Diana was last seen. Significantly, this individual had a prior record of human trafficking charges. However, details about his potential involvement in Diana's disappearance were kept under wraps to avoid jeopardizing the ongoing investigation. A pivotal incident occurred on December 25, 2017. A girl was accosted by a man who demanded her phone and threatened her with a weapon. The frightened victim screamed for help, and a passing couple rushed to her aid, rescuing her from the assailant who tried to drag her into a car. After the victim reported the incident to the police, providing a description of the attacker and their license plate number, officers arrested 41-year-old Jose Enrique Abinay, also known as Elo, the next morning. A background check revealed that Abinay had a prior criminal record and a surprising connection to a previous case. He was the same driver detained in 2016 for suspicion of kidnapping Diana Kerr, but was released due to his wife's alibi. Further questioning of Abinay and his wife led to a breakthrough. The wife confessed to previously lying, stating that her husband was not at home on the night of Diana's disappearance and did not return until 4 a.m. Under pressure, Abinay finally admitted to accidentally hitting Diana with his vehicle and fearing the consequences, disposing of her body rather than reporting the incident to the police. Jose's original story changed when he confessed to kidnapping and murdering Diana. He claimed that he went to the beach to collect gasoline from abandoned cars and came across Diana there. Jose kidnapped Diana, attempted to sexually assault her, and eventually strangled her. Diana Kerr's disappearance was a long and distressing ordeal for her family and those who followed the case. The nearly 500-day investigation, accompanied by relentless media speculation, only added to her loved one's suffering. The unfounded accusations against Diana's parents further complicated and hindered the investigation. Nevertheless, through diligent investigation and the testimony of a second victim, investigators gathered sufficient evidence to identify the perpetrator. Diana will be fondly remembered by her loved ones as a vibrant and lively young woman who tragically crossed paths with a violent criminal. Her story highlights the importance of unity in combating crime, ending impunity, and ensuring the safety of all citizens. Unfortunately, Diana's body was hidden by the perpetrator, who refused to disclose its location for a long time. Eventually, after much effort from family and friends, they were finally able to locate her remains in an abandoned warehouse's well in January 2018. This allowed them to give Diana a proper farewell and burial. As for the perpetrator, Jose, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 35 years. The case of Smith family. George, from a happy family in Greenwich, Connecticut, grew up with his father's liquor store as a central part of his life. After studying business at Babson College, George worked in Boston as a data mining analyst, but his true passion remained the family business. So, he eventually returned home to learn the ins and outs of the store from his father. In 2002, George met Jennifer, also from Connecticut, at a friend's reunion. Jennifer had just started her teaching career as an elementary school teacher. The couple fell deeply in love, and George's parents were overjoyed with his choice. 3 years later, in 2005, they decided to tie the knot and start a new life together. They got married at Castle Hill Inn in Newport, Rhode Island, with the ocean as a stunning backdrop. The honeymoon cruise that followed was meant to be a relaxing and joyful experience. However, it turned out to be a mysterious and frightening journey that filled them with uncertainty. George and Jennifer met Josh, a 20-year-old from California, and another couple on a cruise ship. Josh quickly became friends with George, and on July 1st, the group decided to spend the day together on land when the ship reached the Italian coast. They had an amazing time exploring the island, trying local food, and creating unforgettable memories. That evening, George and Jennifer met up with their friends again on the ship and decided to have a fun night, enjoying appetizers and drinks before heading to the casino. George and Josh played craps while Jennifer played poker. Although they lost a significant amount of money, they didn't regret it, joking that it was part of their honeymoon. The last time George was seen on video was leaving the casino around 2:30 a.m. Tragedy struck on the morning of July 5, 2005, on the Greek island of Mykonos. George, 26, vanished. The ship's captain searched the cabin where strange footprints were found, as well as the deck, but George was nowhere to be found. The available evidence suggested that something serious had happened, possibly involving violence. The news spread quickly, causing alarm among the passengers. Deck 7 was sealed off, and no one was allowed in or out of their cabins. After discovering blood, it was assumed that George and Jennifer had mysteriously disappeared. The senior officer took charge of the investigation, searching their stateroom for clues. One possibility was that George might have fallen overboard. Meanwhile, the search for the young couple continued. By 10 a.m., Jennifer was found where she was having a pre-booked massage. She seemed surprised and concerned, claiming to be unaware of her husband's whereabouts and that she hadn't seen him since the previous night. She revealed that when she woke up that morning, her husband wasn't there. But she didn't search for him, assuming he was with friends or in another cabin. At noon, Turkish authorities arrived on board to begin an investigation, and the ship's captain reassured the anxious passengers, expressing hope that the situation would be resolved soon. The police investigation into George Smith's disappearance began with his wife Jennifer, who was agitated and seemingly unaware of her husband's whereabouts. She told them that men in white uniforms from the Royal Caribbean had come to her door, saying George might have fallen overboard. Traces of blood were found on the boat's awning, suggesting something terrible had happened. The investigators focused on cabin, which was in disarray, with signs of a possible struggle. They found small drops of blood on the carpet and towel, as well as fingerprints on the balcony railing. Turkish investigators discovered 2 small bloodstains on the bedding, which were identified as George's blood. All evidence pointed to George being harmed inside the cabin before he vanished mysteriously. A chair on the balcony had been moved, suggesting someone had sat there, which raised suspicions that George might have fallen from the balcony. However, the high railing and blood on the awning and inside the cabin also hinted at a possible murder. The investigators started to reconstruct the events of that night, trying to figure out who George was with and what led to the tragedy. They questioned the group of young men who had spent time with the newlyweds the previous night. The men revealed that George and Jennifer had consumed too much alcohol, and they had helped him back to his cabin, where they put him to bed and left him alone. However, there were discrepancies in Josh Askin's testimony. He claimed to have seen Jennifer leave with a casino employee named Lloyd, but video footage showed Jennifer stumbling away at 3:30 a.m., leaving George with her new friends. Lloyd's key card data indicated he returned to his cabin at 3:25 a.m., contradicting Josh's account. The investigation continued, with each new detail adding more mystery to the story. It was discovered that Greg Rosenberg, a 19-year-old with Russian roots, had been part of the group that night. He had met Jennifer in the casino, and they had gambled together until late. The group then headed to the disco, where they continued to drink and dance. As the night wore on, the group members began to disperse to their cabins, but not before they were visibly drunk and rowdy. The events of the night became increasingly unclear, with different witnesses providing conflicting accounts. After the cruise ship staff refused to serve two intoxicated visitors, Josh and his friends remembered they had brought a bottle of absinthe from the island of Mykonos. However, crew and passengers were not allowed to consume their own alcohol on board. Josh went to retrieve a special bottle of absinthe from his cabin, which had an unusually high alcohol concentration of over 70%. George hid the bottle in his shorts to avoid detection. Around 3 a.m., when the ship was quiet, a janitor caught the group, including Josh, George, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav, drinking the absinthe. This incident became a key part of the investigation. Jennifer, who had appeared relatively sober, began to stagger and eventually leaned on the casino manager, Lloyd. Her behavior was misinterpreted by some witnesses, who thought she was either trying to keep her balance or flirting. Later, Jennifer got into a conflict with her husband George, which ended with her hitting him. It was unclear whether this was done in a playful or angry manner. Jennifer left the disco around 3:30 a.m., stumbling and visibly intoxicated. The janitor, who had previously noticed the group drinking absinthe, helped her to the elevator and watched her turn right, although her stateroom was on the left. Later, Jennifer was found sleeping in the hallway, far from her room. Two guards and a female duty officer used a wheelchair to return her to her quarters. When they arrived, the clock showed 4:52 a.m., but George was not present. The curtains on the balcony doors were tightly closed, despite the breeze. This raised questions about George's whereabouts. Deputy Chief of Police Chit Hyman and his wife, who were staying in a neighboring cabin, reported hearing a noise on their floor around 4 a.m. They heard loud noises from the newlyweds' stateroom, followed by brief silence, loud talking, and an argument on the balcony. Chit Hyman called guest services to report the noise and pounded on the wall to try to quiet the disturbance. He then saw three unknown men outside the cabin, but did not see George or Jennifer. Several passengers reported hearing a loud noise that sounded like a body hitting the ship's canopy, followed by a woman's scream. However, none of the witnesses had conclusive evidence that a woman was inside the cabin at the time. The investigation raised questions about whether one of the men who entered the cabin might have stayed behind to steal from the newlyweds. The key card records confirm that George and his friends entered his stateroom at 4:05 a.m., according to their testimony, but there is no record of them re-entering the cabin afterwards. This has led to several theories about what might have happened to George Smith. One theory is that George was the victim of a robbery. George and his wife Jennifer had been drinking heavily that night, and by 3:30 a.m., they were no longer able to return to their cabin on their own, suggesting they may have been drugged. Witnesses claimed that George and Jennifer had large sums of money, possibly received as wedding gifts or casino winnings, and that they wore expensive jewelry, including a Breitling watch and an engagement ring. It's possible that their quarters were turned over, and the traces of blood on the sheet could have come from an attempt to remove George's watch. Another theory is that George's death was related to the effects of alcohol and hallucinogens. The captain suggested that George might have had an accidental fall while drunk, and experts noted that absinthe could cause hallucinations in high concentrations. However, the absinthe George and Jennifer purchased was bought officially in Europe, and experts believe it was unlikely to cause hallucinations. The FBI investigation into George's disappearance involved interviewing several key individuals, including Jennifer and casino manager Lloyd Botha, who both passed polygraph tests. Josh Askin failed his polygraph test, which may indicate that he was hiding something, but it could also be due to the interrogation tactics used. A videotape showing 3 men, including Russians, joking about George's disappearance was found, with one of them saying, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute," which could be a hint about what happened to George. In 2009, 4 men, including Greg, Zach, Rostislav, and Josh Askin, were interviewed by the FBI as witnesses. Zach Rosenberg and Josh Askin refused to give direct answers, citing the Fifth Amendment, and their testimony remained ambiguous. The George Smith investigation was influenced by Greg Rosenberg's testimony, who claimed that he and others ordered food to their cabin that night, which would have provided an alibi for the Russian men. However, there are contradictions to this claim, as ship records do not support the order, and the cabin's delivery service was blocked the day before. Furthermore, the staff was instructed not to provide service to them that night. Greg Rosenberg's account of the relationship between George and Jennifer was also unclear, as he claimed it was difficult to determine due to heavy alcohol consumption. He emphasized that everyone in the group was highly intoxicated, making it impossible to draw conclusions about their relationship. However, there are contradictions in Greg's testimony, as Josh Askin stated that Greg left the cabin after ordering food, which Greg denied. These contradictions added complexity to the investigation, requiring further verification and fact-finding. Greg claimed that he had no information about Jennifer or Lloyd Botha's involvement in George's disappearance, but believed that the event was not accidental. He hinted that something significant happened that night that would eventually be revealed. Sadly, Greg Rosenberg was murdered in 2019, and his death remains unsolved, with police investigating a possible link between his murder and George's death. The Smith family persisted in demanding the truth and justice, but their efforts yielded little results. They offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to those responsible and called for a boycott of the ship owner's company, which they believed was covering up the incident. The family's relationship with Jennifer became strained as her behavior seemed suspicious, and her reluctance to share information raised concerns. She claimed to be following FBI instructions, but her decision to accept a $1 million settlement from the cruise company led the Smith family to lose faith in her and suspect that she was hiding something. The Smith family was disappointed with the Turkish authorities' investigation and felt that Jennifer was too quick to accept the offer. They believed that she was not showing the proper interest in finding out what happened to George. Jennifer claimed to remember little from that night, after 2:30 a.m., and was not aware that the liner staff had found her in the corridor and returned her to her cabin. The Turkish investigation did not satisfy the Smith family, leading them to seek the help of independent forensic scientist Henry Lee, who conducted further studies in the cabin and on the balcony that were not included in the official investigation. The investigation into George Smith's disappearance aimed to determine whether his death was a murder or an accident. Henry Lee, an expert, suggested that the balcony's height made it uncertain whether George died from a fall, and alternative scenarios, such as being pushed by someone or being in a state of insanity, could not be ruled out. Lee planned to simulate a fall from the balcony using a dummy to gather more evidence, but the cruise liner's owner refused to allow it. This decision raised suspicions among George's relatives, who believed it was an attempt to conceal the truth. The FBI conducted their own investigation, focusing on the 4 men who spent the night with George, including Josh Askin and 3 Russians. However, their testimonies were inconsistent with those of other witnesses, adding to the confusion. Despite the lengthy investigation and multiple theories, the truth behind George's disappearance remains unknown. His family continues to seek answers, suspecting foul play and initially pointing fingers at Jennifer, his new wife. However, they eventually cleared her of suspicion and received a payout from the cruise company. The family used the payout to secure the release of the investigation results, including witness statements and other evidence. Jennifer, now exonerated, dedicated herself to charity work in George's memory. Years later, Jennifer remarried, but the case remains unsolved. The FBI closed the investigation due to lack of evidence, ruling George's death an accident. The mystery surrounding his disappearance continues to haunt his family, who are still searching for the truth and a sense of closure. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of John Thomas McGuire. Life in an orphanage is difficult and unpredictable. You have no personal space, no control over your time, and if you're not able to stand up for yourself, you're likely to be bullied by the older kids. Amanda and Anna Marie McClure, however, were a little more fortunate because they had each other. With two of them, they were more able to defend themselves. The sisters preferred to keep to themselves and didn't try to make friends with anyone else. They were hopeful that their stay in the orphanage would be short-lived. They believed that their mother would soon find out that their father, Larry McClure, was in prison and that she would come to take them away. It was impossible to keep their father's imprisonment a secret. The news was all over TV and in the newspapers for a long time. As time passed, days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months. Unfortunately, it became clear that they might not be returning home anytime soon. One day, the sisters intervened to protect a new girl, Meredith, from being bullied. Meredith had a difficult past, having lived with a mother who was addicted to drugs. She was very thin, scared, and would jump at the slightest noise. After her mother died of an overdose, Meredith was too afraid to call for help and ended up in the orphanage. Amanda and Anna Marie kept the reason for their presence a secret, brushing it off when Meredith asked about it with a fabricated story about a policeman father who died in the line of duty. However, the truth eventually emerged that their father was not a deceased police officer, but a living criminal serving time in prison for violent sexual crimes against a young girl. This revelation made their lives a living hell. Luckily, the sisters soon got a second chance when two separate families adopted them almost simultaneously, allowing them to start anew. Unfortunately, this meant they would be separated and lose touch with each other. There is no information available about the sisters' experiences in their foster homes. What is known is that Amanda, 29 at the time, met her future husband, John McGuire, now 38. Her adoptive parents had worried that Amanda would remain single forever, given her lack of biological family and the emotional trauma of her mother's betrayal. Larry McClure, the father, was released on parole and returned to Virginia, where he lived in a mobile home. He was determined to reconnect with his daughters. First, he visited Amanda's foster parents, Guam and Alex, and introduced himself, asking to see Amanda and requesting her contact information. At the time, Larry was dishonest about Anna Marie's whereabouts, claiming she lived in North Carolina, 186 miles away, when in fact, he had never seen or spoken to her. Despite this, Larry was able to meet with Amanda, and their reunions eventually led to him introducing her and her friend John to illegal drugs that he manufactured in his camper. The tragic events unfolded on Valentine's Day. John, who was still recovering from the effects of drug abuse and was deeply in love with Amanda, decided to surprise her with a romantic evening at home. However, during the meal, John's affectionate words to Amanda made Larry extremely anxious, causing tension to build. Larry stopped his son-in-law John from speaking and asked if he could be completely honest with his wife Amanda. John agreed, and Larry suggested a game. John's legs were tied, and he was asked to answer all questions about his life truthfully. At first, the questions were harmless, but as Larry became more intoxicated, he started accusing John of being an undercover FBI agent. 3 weeks later, Larry and Amanda got married. To keep their relationship a secret, Larry changed his name. The new family decided to start fresh in Kentucky, vowing to quit illegal substances for good. To blend in with their neighbors, they even hung a U.S. flag on their rented house's door. By 2019, John's family, including his ex-wife and parents, had become worried because they hadn't heard from him. John's mother even went so far as to file a missing person report with the police. Meanwhile, Larry was in trouble with the law again. He had failed to notify the authorities that he had moved to a different state, which violated the terms of his probation. As a result, he was sent back to prison. Larry's mental state had deteriorated significantly due to his long history of substance abuse and mixing drugs with alcohol. Suddenly finding himself in a place where he couldn't access these substances triggered withdrawal symptoms, including increased anxiety and a blurred sense of reality. It's likely that this led him to make irrational decisions, such as marrying his own daughter. Larry became convinced that the real reason for his parole violation was to search for John's body, which he believed was buried in his backyard. He urgently needed to get a message to his daughters, Ploddard, Amanda, or Anna Marie, to dig up the body parts and rebury them in a different location. However, all prison calls are monitored, so he had to find a way to convey this information discreetly. Larry meticulously prepared a speech, considering every detail, but was prohibited from making any phone calls. Despite this, he eventually couldn't resist and confessed to the duty officer, although his intentions remain unclear. Larry's reasoning was that if he confessed to the murder before being charged, he might avoid the death penalty, and if he implicated his daughters, that would be even better. However, the officer was initially skeptical, wondering what Larry was talking about. Why would this addict incriminate himself? Nevertheless, the officer was required by law to investigate Larry's claims. Initially, the officer intended to perform a cursory verification, simply confirming that a statement had been made and the alleged crime scene had been checked, but finding nothing. However, it was discovered that John was indeed missing, and as a precaution, a police unit was sent to Larry's residence. Upon searching the area, they found traces of lime, just as Larry had mentioned, and soon every aspect of his confession was corroborated. The McClure sisters were promptly apprehended. Amanda and Anna Marie were stunned when their father and husband, Larry, confessed to a brutal murder. Their shock turned to disbelief when Larry tried to shift the blame, testifying that his daughters were responsible for the crime and he was an unwitting participant. As the family's story unraveled, each member attempted to distance themselves from the crime, claiming it was an accident. John's relatives were especially grief-stricken, as they had to come to terms with the fact that his body was never found, only remains. These remains had to be retrieved from forensic experts and transported to his parents for burial in a closed coffin. Despite the challenges, John's parents were able to lay him to rest, thanks to the help of friends who contributed financially, assisted with transportation, and made funeral arrangements. John was finally laid to rest at a Lutheran church on October 25, 2019. On February 15, the day after Valentine's Day, a member of the McClure family posted a message on John's Facebook page, pretending it was from him. The message said he was going on a trip and would be out of touch for a long time, and asked his friends not to worry about his extended absence. This was a tactic to mislead everyone, as the family knew they were about to kill John and didn't want to arouse suspicion. Despite the heinous nature of their crime, during the trial, Larry and Amanda received an additional 6 months in their sentence due to their incestuous marriage, which is illegal in their state. The trial began, and Larry was given the floor. He stated that he had felt remorse for his own children for most of his life. He admitted that when they were very young, he had committed a serious crime that put them in an orphanage. He explained that their birth mother had abandoned them, and he was the only one who had a heartache for his little ones. He expressed his extreme gratitude to the people who had adopted his babies. He said he would not hide, and even attended churches and prayed for their adoptive parents when he got out. He confessed that he had crazily wanted to make up for all the years he had missed. He confessed that he could have walked away from the crime if he had convinced Amanda not to do it, but he didn't. He admitted that the judge and jury would probably not understand him, and he shared their point of view, but emphasized that they weren't in his shoes. He mentioned that John was a fine young man and expressed his regret for John. He stated that if he could, he would turn things around, but no one could raise the dead, and he couldn't say no to Amanda, his favorite and youngest daughter, who didn't care about John. All Amanda wanted was to be able to withdraw government money from John's account. The trial went on for a very long time as the defendants flip-flopped back and forth on the decision to kill John. Amanda, who could not tolerate such a long trial, even made a deal with the investigators where she was promised to be charged with involuntary manslaughter at the next trial. Larry had given a very different speech when it all started, stating that the four of them had bought the ingredients to make illegal substances and went back to his trailer where he had started making them. Amanda had come up to him and said she wanted to get back at John. He explained that John, under the influence of drugs, had raped Anna Marie, who then got pregnant, and that he had to earn the trust of his daughters after all those years apart, so he couldn't refuse. Larry blamed himself for that and thought every day that he should hang himself, but questioned why it should be him if the crime was their fault. After Larry's speech, John's family got the floor. His mother sobbed non-stop, so much so that she couldn't say a word. She expressed that even if she could ever forgive the McClure family, she would never be able to forget what happened. She also conveyed that she wished she could live to see the day when one of them died before her. John's children were given a chance to speak, and they vehemently cursed the killers, declaring that they would never forgive them. The judge then delivered the final verdict, sentencing Larry McClure to life in prison without parole. When Amanda's punishment was announced, her adoptive parents were filled with regret, revealing to her that her biological father had been searching for her. They had raised her to have freedom of choice, but unaware that this freedom could have such severe consequences on her future. Amanda, however, shifted the blame to her biological father, claiming that his jealousy had driven her to commit the crime. Her adoptive parents pleaded with the judge to consider the negative influence of her biological father, arguing that their adopted daughter would not have committed such a brutal crime without it. Nevertheless, the prosecutors viewed the murder as a premeditated conspiracy, orchestrated so that Amanda and Larry could be together as a couple. The first hearing focused on Amanda, who received a 40-year sentence. However, the judge predicted she would likely serve only 20 years. During Anna Marie's hearing, she attempted to demonstrate her opposition to John's murder, but felt coerced by her father and sister to see it through. She only attended Larry and Amanda's wedding out of fear for her own future. Ultimately, Anna Marie was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lin family. The Lin family's story is a heart-wrenching tale of love, ambition, and tragedy that began in the late 1980s. Min Lin and Yunli Lin, both Chinese nationals, met at an Australian university where they were pursuing higher education. Min had stayed on after completing his degree for a professional internship, while Yun had arrived through an exchange program. Their chance encounter in a university corridor sparked an instant attraction, which they later described as love at first sight. As foreigners in a new land, they shared a deep connection, united by their dreams of building a new life in Australia. After graduating, the couple married and settled down in the peaceful suburb of North Epping in Sydney. Their love flourished, and they built a close-knit family, deeply committed to each other. In August 1994, they welcomed their first child, June Brenda Lin, who went by her middle name Brenda. 2 more children followed, Henry in 1997 and Terry in 2000. As the family entered the 2000s, Min and Yun decided to start a business venture, opening a small newsstand together. Through hard work and dedication, they turned their humble beginning into a successful news agency with a publishing branch on Rose Street. As their business thrived, they were able to afford a comfortable lifestyle, complete with a spacious home, a luxury car, and exclusive private schooling for their children. Min focused on managing the business, while Yun dedicated herself to taking care of their home and raising their kids. The community highly respected the Lins for their hard work, kindness, and charitable nature. They were known for being exemplary, caring parents who avoided conflicts. Their children were outstanding in their own ways. Brenda, the eldest, was a stunning beauty and an exceptional student with a passion for helping animals. Henry and Terry, the boys, were energetic and sports enthusiasts, sharing a love for soccer. The siblings were incredibly close, almost inseparable. As the Lin family's prosperity grew, they began to sponsor relatives from China to visit, live, or even settle in Australia permanently. Min's parents were the first to make the move, settling in North Epping and helping with the kids. Min's father also worked part-time at their newsstand on weekends. Later, Yun's parents also moved to the same Sydney suburb, and Min and Yun bought them a small house. Yun's sister, Irene, joined the Lin household, helping with chores and childcare. By this time, the Lin family business had become very successful, earning almost $1 million per year. It had become a popular gathering place where people would come to read, discuss news, and socialize over coffee. In late 2007, Min Lin's younger sister, Kathy Lin, and her husband, Lang Bin Robert, moved to Sydney seeking better opportunities. They had previously visited relatives in Australia and had briefly lived in Melbourne before returning to China. This time, they were determined to settle in Australia for good. Robert, a former successful ear, nose, and throat doctor in China, decided to try his hand at entrepreneurship. Kathy and Robert invested all their savings into opening their own restaurant in Sydney, but unfortunately it struggled and eventually closed. Their subsequent attempts to open a cafe or snack bar also failed. Robert, who lacked business experience and financial management skills, struggled to succeed in his new ventures. Robert and Kathy moved to North Epping to be closer to their family. Kathy found a job, but Robert was still trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. The Lin and Z families were close, not just because they were related, but also because they were good friends. They saw each other almost every day, kept in touch constantly, and often had meals together. The last time they all got together was on the evening of July 17, 2009, at Kathy and Min's parents' house. Unfortunately, they didn't know it would be their last time together. The next morning, July 18th, the Lin family's shop didn't open, which was unusual because it was always open 7 days a week. The shop didn't have any signs or notices on the door saying it would be closed, which worried the regular customers and other shop owners in the area. One of them tried to call Min several times, but couldn't get through, so they called Kathy to ask her what was going on. Kathy was surprised and worried because her brother Min never closed the shop without telling anyone first, and usually had their father or father-in-law cover for him. She tried calling Min and his wife Yun, but they didn't answer. She even tried calling their home phone, but no one picked up. Kathy and her husband Robert visited Min's house, worried about the family's safety. They arrived at 9 a.m. to find the family car in the driveway and the front door unlocked, but no one was responding to their calls. The house was quiet and seemed undisturbed, with no signs of forced entry. As Kathy called out for her brother again, she went upstairs to the second floor. When she opened the bedroom door of Min and Yun Lin, she was shocked and horrified by what she saw. The room was covered in blood. On the floor, walls, ceiling, furniture, and curtains. Yun Lin's lifeless body lay near the bed, so badly mutilated that it was hard to recognize. In the next room, Irene, Yun's sister, lay dead in her bed, her face brutally beaten. In the children's bedrooms, Kathy found the bodies of 12-year-old Henry and 9-year-old Terry, both brutally beaten to death, and lying in different corners of the room. Brenda, the 15-year-old daughter, was fortunate to be away on a school trip the previous day and avoided being at home during the tragic events. When Kathy discovered the carnage, she immediately called emergency services, but her frantic state made it difficult for her to provide clear information. She begged for medical help to arrive quickly, hoping to save anyone who might still be alive. Unfortunately, the first responders who arrived at the scene confirmed the deaths of all the victims. The next morning, a disturbing discovery was made after Kathy's emergency call. Robert went to fetch Brenda's grandparents, who lived about 10 kilometers away, while the police and paramedics rushed to the scene. What they found was soon classified as one of the most horrific crime scenes they had ever encountered. The Lynn family was tragically killed, each member suffering multiple blows to the head from a heavy blunt object, similar to a hammer. The murder weapon was not found at the scene. It appeared that the killer struck the father first, followed by the mother, her sister, and finally the two boys. Initially, investigators found no significant clues, and the fact that valuables and money were left untouched suggested that the primary motive was to eliminate the family rather than rob them. Initially, it seemed unlikely that one person could overpower the entire family, and multiple suspects were suspected. However, evidence revealed that the children were awake during the attack and had tried to escape, leaving behind bloodstains and splatters throughout the house. Further investigation showed that the adult victims, in addition to head injuries, also suffered signs of strangulation, possibly to minimize resistance during the assault. The killer left behind identical bloody shoe prints in each room with a unique tread pattern, but the shoe brand and owner could not be identified, only the shoe size. Notably, no foreign fingerprints were found, suggesting that the killer wore gloves. The Lynn family massacre investigation initially yielded no leads or suspects, despite the family having no known enemies. The attack occurred between midnight and 3 a.m. on July 18th. Brenda Lynn, the sole survivor and eldest child, was on a school trip to New Caledonia at the time. She was informed of the tragedy through social media, but initially disbelieved it, hoping it was a mistake. Her aunt Kathy called and confirmed the news, and Brenda was flown back to Sydney, where her new guardians, Kathy and Robert, met her. She moved in with them as the Lynn family home was sealed as a crime scene. The next day, Brenda was questioned by the police but could provide no new information, insisting her family had no enemies and had noticed nothing unusual before her trip. After her family's death, Brenda inherited the family business and properties. As she was still a minor, her Aunt Kathy and Uncle Robert became her legal guardians, responsible for managing the estate on her behalf. Although her grandparents offered to help, Kathy and Robert wanted to care for her, and the matter was resolved amicably. The family's shop and publishing business reopened under Robert's management. As Brenda was not yet ready to take over, Robert reviewed the family's financial assets, including bank accounts and properties. Experts examined the crime scene, but despite their efforts, found no concrete leads, suggesting the killer likely acted alone and entered the house quietly. The killer wore distinctive size 9.5 shoes with an ornate tread pattern, used a hammer as the weapon, and wore gloves, preventing fingerprint evidence. The lack of foreign DNA and bloodstains on the doorknobs of each bedroom where the crimes occurred indicated the killer's bloody gloves touched them, except for Brenda's room, suggesting the killer was aware of her absence. The tragic incident received widespread media coverage, but despite this, no substantial evidence or suspects emerged. Rumors and theories circulated, including the Lynn family's supposed wealth being the motive, a bungled robbery, or involvement by local Chinese mafia clans. While these theories were not entirely dismissed, they were later deemed unlikely due to a lack of evidence. As the investigation continued, none of the theories were proven, and no suspects came forward. The robbery theory was eventually ruled out when it became clear the killer's sole intention was to eliminate the household members, leaving behind untouched money and valuables. The power outage in the house suggests the killer was familiar with the location of the electrical panel and had likely been in the house before, possibly having obtained a key in advance. After thoroughly reviewing the case details, an investigator re-listened to Kathy's emergency call and finally discovered a significant hint in the recording. A 911 call recorded Kathy's desperate attempts to explain the situation, her words interspersed with cries and sobs. At the end of the call, Kathy surprisingly addressed her husband directly in Cantonese, saying she didn't want to be left alone in the house. This caught the investigators' attention, and they translated her words. This was significant because Robert had chosen to pick up his in-laws himself, leaving Kathy alone at the crime scene before the police arrived. His behavior seemed highly suspicious, as 5 people had just been brutally taken away from the house, and the killer could still have been hiding inside. The police discovered that Robert had a key to his brother-in-law's house, which he had been given just before the tragedy. He never mentioned this during questioning. Kathy was unaware of this fact, but Brenda unintentionally revealed it to the investigators. Further inquiry exposed Robert's false claim of being a successful ear, nose, and throat doctor. He had a medical degree, but never had a steady job in the field. There were rumors that he fled to Australia to escape punishment for alleged bribery charges in China. After settling in North America, Robert became financially dependent on his wife's income and occasional financial help from Kathy's relatives. Once the guardianship papers for Brenda were finalized, Robert behaved as if he had inherited the Lin family's entire estate. He forced Yun's parents out of the house that Min had bought for them, though it was legally under the deceased name. Considering these facts and circumstances, investigators believed Robert was motivated by jealousy of his wife's wealthy and successful relatives and had long planned to take their property, money, and business. The police couldn't arrest Robert yet because they lacked concrete evidence against him. They obtained permission to install hidden cameras in the Z household, hoping to gather evidence to prove Robert's guilt. The breakthrough came when Kathy mentioned her husband's preference for a specific brand of shoes during an interrogation. Robert had bought 2 pairs of limited edition sneakers years earlier and still had a pair in its box at home. Significantly, Robert wore size 9.5 shoes, the same size as the killer's. Hidden cameras caught Robert destroying the box containing the shoes. This led to a search warrant for Robert's home, where a new pair of size 9.5 sneakers was found. The tread pattern on these shoes matched the prints found at the crime scene. Moreover, a small smear of blood was discovered in his garage. Forensic analysis confirmed that the smear was indeed a blood stain containing the DNA of all 5 Lin family victims, directly linking it to the crime scene. This evidence led to Robert's arrest, providing the concrete proof the police needed to take action. In May 2011, 2 years after the tragedy, the evidence led to Robert's arrest. Despite his vehement denials of involvement, the police had finally gathered enough evidence to take action. Robert downplayed the importance of the sneakers found in his possession, claiming they were new and that he had gotten rid of the old pair. While awaiting trial in prison, he unknowingly shared cells with several informants and made some incriminating statements. During one conversation, Robert revealed that he had meticulously planned the crime and taken great care to cover his tracks. He admitted to buying the murder weapon at a remote store without surveillance cameras and drugging his wife with sedatives to prevent her from waking up and noticing his absence. Robert also confessed to disposing of the evidence, including the hammer, sneakers, gloves, and clothing, in a way that would ensure they would never be found. At the trial, however, Robert denied all of this, and the only evidence against him was the testimony from his cellmates and some indirect evidence. As a result, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict, and Robert was released on bail in December 2015. The trial resumed in June 2016 with new testimony from another informant, who claimed that Robert had confessed to an obsession with Brenda since she was 13 years old. This new information led to a re-examination of Brenda, who tearfully revealed that Robert had coerced her into a sexual relationship when she was just 13. She had remained silent about the abuse for years, fearing retaliation. With this new evidence, Robert was found guilty on all charges. He received 5 life sentences, 1 for each murder, without the possibility of parole. All of his subsequent appeals were denied. The case of Cassandra Cantrell. Cassandra and her twin brother Rob shared a unique bond, fueled by their love of scary stories. As kids, they'd spend hours in a darkened room, taking turns telling each other spine-tingling tales. Rob fancied himself a master storyteller, but Cassandra would always scream at the end of each story, teasing him about not being scary enough. They'd also watch Scooby-Doo together, debating which characters might be ghosts or vampires in disguise. Cassandra's instincts often proved correct, leaving Rob on edge. Their mother, Mary Smith, encouraged their love of reading by buying them books by Robert Wall. What started as a childhood hobby evolved into a lifelong passion for horror. As adults, they even collected villain figurines and considered opening a horror-themed store. An interest in horror movies brought Cassandra to the set in 2004. She got a cameo in a scary movie that, although it didn't become popular, still caused a storm of envy and led Rob to start asking his sister to make a deal for him. He asked her if she had made some acquaintances there and said he was ready to play anyone. He urged her to talk, adding that he was pretty close with the head of the cast and maybe something would come out of it, but he made no promises. Cassandra replied that she had gotten the part by accident herself. Rob was very happy, but despite his enthusiasm, he was not able to play, even in an episodic role. The lead actor in the movie was Colin Dudley, and on set, he and the debutante actress felt an undeniable chemistry. However, neither of them dared to take the first step. That was until they attended a corporate Halloween party together. Cassandra dressed up as Velma from Scooby-Doo, while Colin went as Alex from A Clockwork Orange. The costume held a deeper significance for Colin than just a simple character. It seemed to resonate with him on a deeper level. He had been walking with a glass of milk all evening, looking at everyone with a glare, just as his character had done in the movie. He had also quoted a lot from the book. For example, he had looked at Cassandra with delight and had said that beauty invariably caused his only desire to destroy it, for it did not fit at all into their ugly world. Cassandra had thought it was a compliment, and they had soon started dating, but their relationship had not lasted long, only a couple of months. Colin had found another actress, Rebecca, and had started dating her, and later on, the couple had started living together. On August 25, 2020, Cassandra Cantrell vanished without warning. She drove away from home in an unknown direction and failed to respond to phone calls. When her mother, Mary Smith, reported her disappearance to the police, they were initially reluctant to take action, suggesting that Cassandra might simply be out with friends and would turn up soon. But Mary was convinced that something was seriously wrong and pressed the police to investigate. It took 2 days for them to begin searching for Cassandra, and on the 3rd day, they found her car parked under a bridge in a notorious neighborhood known for its high crime rate and homeless population. The car was unlocked and the keys were still inside. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Why was Cassandra in this dangerous area, known for its frequent violent crimes and drug-related deaths? The police had to canvass the neighborhood, questioning homeless individuals who, unsurprisingly, were hesitant to cooperate with the authorities. The residents living under the bridge, who spent their days drinking, had no information about Cassandra's whereabouts or when her car arrived. This lack of knowledge was hardly surprising. The detective in charge of searching for Cassandra had obtained her cell phone billing records, as per protocol, but based on his experience, he doubted it would lead to any useful leads, and indeed, it didn't. The signal from Cassandra's phone indicated it was in the nearby body of water under the bridge. Unfortunately, this meant the detectives would be unable to retrieve the phone and access the crucial information it held. Prior to conducting a thorough search of the coastal area, a team of divers stood on the shore and tested the distance they could throw rocks into the water. This test would help them gauge the likelihood of finding the phone. Cassandra's mother had mentioned that her daughter's phone case was adorned with distinctive rhinestones, making it easier to spot. As it turned out, the phone was soon found, but sadly, Cassandra's body was not in the water. While the detectives presented this as a positive development, Cassandra's mother remained distraught and unconsoled. She seemed to have gotten used to the idea that her daughter was dead, and the only thing she wanted was for her body to be found and for the nightmare of uncertainty to end. She sadly mentioned that she had been looking forward to her granddaughter, wanted to be a grandmother sooner, and didn't even have time to give her a crib, which was just sitting in the garage in a box. She wondered what she should do with it now, not realizing that this became important information for the investigation. According to statistics, a large number of crimes against pregnant women are committed by their partners. However, Mary Smith's daughter, Cassandra, was not married and did not have a partner. Despite her age, Cassandra was not in a relationship with anyone. Mary was puzzled because Cassandra had gotten pregnant, but she had no information about the baby's father. Cassandra had been in frequent contact with someone, often calling and messaging them. However, the phone number of this person was not recorded in Cassandra's phone book, and Mary couldn't remember the number. This lack of information left Mary in the dark about the identity of her future grandchild's father. Cassandra frequently communicated with a person without saving their number, which was unusual. Typically, girls couldn't keep their relationships completely secret and would confide in at least one friend, especially when it came to sensitive topics like pregnancy. In this case, the friend was acquainted with police officers. In conversation with the police, Cassandra revealed that she had reunited with her former boyfriend, Colin Dudley. Although their initial relationship in 2004 was brief, it was surprising that they reconnected after 15 years apart. What was even more unexpected was that Colin, with whom Cassandra worked on a movie set in 2014, was the one who reached out to her. Colin reached out to Cassandra on Facebook, expressing condolences and sharing the recent loss of his father, with whom his wife Rebecca had a troubled history. Cassandra, motivated by kindness, agreed to meet Colin to offer comfort, but their encounter blossomed into a romantic connection. From 2014 onwards, Colin led a double life, juggling two families, with Cassandra as his mistress. When Cassandra discovered she was pregnant, she chose not to inform Colin, recalling his earlier statement that he didn't want children and was happy with Rebecca's infertility. Fearful that revealing the pregnancy would disrupt his primary family, Cassandra kept the news secret. However, as her belly grew, it became increasingly difficult to conceal. To avoid arousing Colin's suspicion, Cassandra stopped seeing him. Cassandra knew she couldn't keep her secret hidden forever. Lying about having another boyfriend would hurt Colin and lead to their breakup. So she made the difficult decision to tell him the truth. She was pregnant with his child. Over the phone, Colin initially remained silent, but then surprisingly expressed his delight at the news. Cassandra believed he was genuinely happy about it. Meanwhile, a detective arrived at Colin's house and knocked on the door. Colin's wife answered, and the detective, not wanting to discuss Colin's missing mistress in front of her, introduced himself as an old friend of Dudley's, avoiding any awkwardness. Colin quickly left the house with the detective, shutting the door behind him, and walked away from the house without even waiting for an introduction. He seemed to have been expecting their meeting. Colin thanked the detective for being discreet about his credentials in front of Rebecca. He spoke in short sentences, explaining that he had heard Cassandra was missing and found it extremely strange. He admitted he couldn't even guess where she might have gone. He told the detective that Cassandra had confided in him about her fight with her brother and was worried about it. He had advised her to make amends, but didn't know if she had taken his advice. The detective already knew about the fight between Cassandra and her brother, Rob, who had spoken to him about it. Rob had refused to meet with Cassandra on the day she disappeared, which he now regretted. Colin blamed himself for not being able to prevent her disappearance, thinking that if she had visited him that day, she might still be safe. Colin confessed to the detective that he wasn't a good person and acknowledged his past mistakes. He had secretly dated his ex-girlfriend, Cassandra, while still married to Rebecca, knowing it was wrong. He believed that his actions would have consequences in the afterlife, but insisted that he couldn't help who he fell in love with. After his father's death in 2014, Colin resumed his relationship with Cassandra, fulfilling one of his father's wishes. He had broken up with her soon after Christmas, which his father had criticized him for. His father had liked Cassandra, unlike Rebecca, whom he hated. Colin explained that living a double life for 5 years had been exhausting and guilt-ridden. He made excuses to hide his late-night returns, pretending to go on business trips or fishing, which he despised. He even bought fish to deceive Rebecca, who would cook them, despite the smell making him sick. Colin mentioned that Cassandra was pregnant, but didn't know who the father was. He heard from a close friend that Cassandra claimed the baby was his, which he found hard to believe. Lately, Cassandra had been avoiding him, and he understood why, as she wanted a family, something he couldn't provide. The detective asked Colin when he last saw Cassandra, and he replied that he couldn't remember, guessing it was around 3 to 4 months ago, except for a brief encounter at the mall when his wife was in the fitting room. Colin asked the detective if they thought they would find Cassandra alive, and the detective assured him they were doing everything possible. However, this wasn't Colin's last encounter with the detective. The police discovered that Colin was the owner of the unsigned phone number Cassandra's mother had mentioned. It turned out that Cassandra had frequently called Colin, including on the day she disappeared. Additionally, CCTV footage from the train station near the bridge where her car was found showed a suspicious man on the platform. The suspect wore a disguise, covering his face and head, making it impossible to identify him. However, the detective noticed that the man's gait and hat were eerily similar to those of Colin Dudley and Alex from A Clockwork Orange. The detectives followed the suspect through CCTV cameras, watching as he entered a cafe, left, and drove away in a car with a license plate registered to Colin Dudley. Armed with a search warrant, the police searched Colin's house, hoping to find Cassandra alive in the basement. Initially, they found no evidence of a crime, but they did discover the hat Colin had worn as a disguise. In the basement, a service dog trained to detect blood scents began barking, suggesting something was amiss. Colin claimed innocence, stating that the police were trying to frame him due to a lack of evidence and suspects. His wife was shocked and upset, but when asked if she thought her husband was capable of murder, she hesitated before saying no. Despite the circumstantial evidence, there wasn't enough to imprison Colin, frustrating Rob and Mary Smith and leaving the detective feeling helpless. Colin was questioned again, and he provided an alibi, stating that he had visited a hardware store on the morning of August 25th to buy cleaning supplies and trash bags. However, the large trash bags raised suspicions. The police also discovered a deleted text message from Cassandra, stating that she was approaching Colin's house. Additionally, phone records showed that the couple hadn't left the house for hours that morning. Colin had turned off his phone, but accidentally left Cassandra's phone on, allowing the police to track his movements, including his presence on CCTV cameras. After the murder, Colin went to a cafe to clean up, then drove to the pond where he had thrown away Cassandra's phone, which the police had tracked to its last signal. Now, the police needed to find Cassandra's body. To retrace Colin's route, The police took a GPS tracker from his car, which showed that it had followed the same path as Cassandra's phone. The next day, the police followed Colin's path through the woods and found a large trash can tied with ropes in a ravine. The area around it was covered in blood, and it was clear what was inside. After a month, identifying the body was difficult, but the police were able to do so thanks to a tattoo described in the missing persons report. Colin was arrested and charged with murder. A forensic examination revealed that Cassandra died from a fractured skull caused by blunt force trauma. The police also found traces of blood in the basement of the Dudley house that couldn't be fully cleaned. Rebecca, Colin's wife, had been in a different part of the house and hadn't heard anything. She also revealed that Colin had never wanted children and had lied about her infertility. The police considered this a motive for the crime. During the trial, due to a lack of witnesses and physical evidence, the jury couldn't be convinced that Colin had committed the murder. So, the court offered Colin a deal. If he pleaded guilty, he would get a shorter sentence. Colin was sentenced to 26 years in prison. Cassandra's mother and brother were devastated, feeling guilty that they hadn't met with Cassandra before her death, and that the killer would likely be released one day. The case of Kelly Cochran. Christopher Reagan grew up in Detroit, Michigan, where he received his education. At 20, he decided to serve his country and join the military. He was stationed at a base near Marquette, where he met Terry, a young teacher from Iron River. They became friends, bonding over their shared values and interests. Their friendship grew into a close relationship, but Christopher's military service didn't allow for a romantic relationship. When he left the military, he moved to Traverse City, but the distance didn't weaken their bond. In 2012, Christopher proposed a long-distance romantic relationship, and Terry agreed. They shared many common interests, including a love of nature and a desire for a peaceful lifestyle. They decided to live together in Iron River, where Christopher found a job at a factory. However, after 2 years, their passion faded and they parted ways amicably. Christopher moved out and began looking for a new place to live. He found a job in Asheville, North Carolina, and started a new chapter in his life. On October 14th, he told Terry he had taken the day off and suggested they meet up the next day for a walk. However, he failed to contact her the next day, and Terry became worried. After trying to reach him for several days, Terry filed a police report about Christopher's disappearance. The police reassured her that people sometimes disappear and then return, but Terry was concerned. At the police station, Terry told investigators that Christopher had recently received a job offer in North Carolina and might have started a new life, cutting ties with his past. However, to avoid speculation, a detailed investigation was launched. The police identified the company where Christopher had started working and contacted an employee, but surprisingly, no information about Christopher could be obtained, as he hadn't shown up to work in 10 days. Search efforts were then focused on the local woods, where Christopher often took solo trips with specially trained dogs deployed to aid in the search. Unfortunately, no trace of him was found. Terry suggested searching Christopher's former apartment to rule out any accidents or potential clues to his whereabouts. Upon entering the apartment, detectives found it in disarray, with items scattered across the floor and open closets. Although it initially seemed like Christopher was simply a messy person, Terry knew him to be more organized. The detectives began to suspect that the disarray might be related to a crime. After inspecting the apartment, they decided to expand the search area. They eventually found Christopher's car outside the city limits, about 8 miles from Iron River. Inside the car, they found ordinary clothes and a piece of yellow paper with a route written on it. The route had no specific address, but detailed notes described the path, including turning at a bus stop or driving past a gas station. Terry explained that Christopher, despite living in Iron River, wasn't familiar with the street names, so he wrote down directions in this way. The detectives followed the route, which led them to a house in a neighboring town. Upon knocking on the door, they met Jason Cochran, an overweight man, and his wife Kelly. The officers informed the couple that they were investigating Christopher's disappearance and found a piece of paper with their address in his abandoned car. Kelly revealed that she worked with Christopher at the same plant, and they were friends. Although Kelly hadn't been in contact with Christopher recently, she had tried to reach him via text messages in mid-October. She assumed he had started his new job in North Carolina and didn't respond. Kelly also mentioned Christopher's health issues, which might have led him to start anew. The investigators were puzzled by the route leading to the Cochran home and why it was in Christopher's car. Despite the lack of answers, the couple cooperated with the investigation. After further questioning, the detectives left the Cochran home and proceeded to interview Christopher's coworkers at the factory. There, they discovered that Christopher was having an affair with Kelly Cochran, which had been rumored for months. The investigation into Christopher's disappearance sparked a new lead when Kelly Cochran made a surprising statement. Investigators decided to re-question Kelly and her husband Jason to get to the bottom of their relationship. Kelly eventually admitted to having an affair with Christopher, but initially withheld the information because of her husband's presence. Kelly claimed that she and Jason had an open relationship and Jason was okay with her infidelity. However, Christopher's coworkers disputed this, saying that Jason did not approve of the affair and that the Cochran family did not have an open relationship. When Jason was questioned, he revealed that he was strongly opposed to his wife's infidelity, making him a suspect. However, the lack of concrete evidence meant that the investigators couldn't conclude that he was involved in Christopher's disappearance. Kelly and Jason were released from the police station, and the investigation continued for 5 months without a breakthrough. A new investigator, Detective Jeremy Ogden, took over the case and began a thorough analysis of the Cochran family's history. Kelly and Jason had met in high school and started living together after graduation. Despite their personality differences, they got married and started a swimming pool maintenance business. Jason handled most of the work, but the physical demands took a toll on his health, leaving him with back problems. When Jason's condition worsened, Kelly took over the business. During this time, Kelly sought ways to help her husband recover, including finding a medicinal plant that could help alleviate his back pain. However, the plant was banned in their state, so they moved to Michigan in 2014 to access it. In Michigan, Kelly and Jason got jobs at the same plant where Christopher worked. Kelly and Christopher became close friends, which was important to him given his relationship troubles with Terry. The prosecutors eventually obtained a search warrant for the Cochrans' home, but the search yielded no evidence linking them to Christopher's disappearance. The only significant find was a book written by Jason under a pseudonym inspired by video games. The title of the book caught their attention, but its content was disturbing. The book described violent murder scenes targeting everyone who had ever wronged Jason. The detectives read it thoroughly and found a character that matched Christopher's profile exactly. This strengthened their suspicions about Jason, making them wonder if he wasn't making up the crimes, but instead drawing inspiration from real events he had committed. 3 weeks later, the police decided to conduct another search of the Cochran house, hoping to find evidence they might have missed the first time. However, when they arrived, they found the house empty and the family had moved to Indiana. This made the investigators anxious, as they feared they might not find the crucial evidence they had been searching for months, particularly DNA samples from the suspects. Michigan police contacted their Indiana counterparts to help collect DNA samples from the Cochrans. The Indiana police officers went to the Cochrans' new home, and Jason and Kelly did not object to the procedure, as there was no concrete evidence linking them to the murder. Time passed, and on February 22, 2016, Kelly called the police, frantic, saying her husband Jason was unresponsive. When the rescue team arrived, they found Kelly in a panic, trying to obstruct the doctors. Jason was sitting in a chair, his face severely burned as if from extreme overheating. The doctors confirmed his death, and the body was sent for forensic examination. During the search of the Cochran's new home, an officer discovered a syringe needle near the bed. The forensic report revealed that Jason's death was not due to drug abuse, as initially suspected, but rather strangulation, confirmed by bruises on his neck and face. This discovery turned Jason, the prime suspect in Christopher's kidnapping, into a victim himself. The investigation became even more complex, and forensic experts shifted their focus to Kelly Cochran, who now became the prime suspect in both Christopher's disappearance and her husband's murder. Kelly was invited to the police station to testify in Jason's murder case. During the interrogation, the investigators asked her directly if she had administered excessive doses of illegal drugs to her husband or was involved in his death. However, despite the pressure, Kelly did not confess to either crime. Months later, the investigators still lacked concrete evidence to prove Kelly's guilt and justify an arrest. During the investigation, Detective Jeremy Ogden met Walter Hammerman, a close friend of Jason's, who insisted that illegal drugs could not have caused Jason's death, as he knew his friend well and would have been informed about any changes in his life. Jason had been using medicinal herbs to alleviate his chronic back pain. However, his friend Walter noticed a significant change in his behavior around March last year. Jason confided in Walter about the mounting pressure from the Iron River police, who suspected him and his wife Kelly of involvement in a man's disappearance. The ordeal had taken a toll on Jason, leaving him depressed and even suicidal, which required intensive treatment. Walter observed that Kelly had begun to exert more control over Jason's life, making him increasingly anxious and withdrawn. Jason would avoid social gatherings when Kelly was around, and their video game sessions had become a thing of the past. These observations proved crucial in the investigation, helping detectives understand the dynamics within the Cochran family. After the medical examiner determined that Jason's death was by strangulation, Detective Ogden devised a plan to lure Kelly into a trap. The plan involved using Walter as bait to prompt Kelly into making a mistake. Walter agreed to play along, and on March 12, 2016, he called Kelly under police surveillance. He pretended that Jason had given him a letter containing vital information, which Kelly was supposed to send to the police if anything happened to Jason. However, Kelly suddenly told Walter to drop the idea, catching both him and the police off guard. Despite this, detectives still lacked concrete evidence, and Kelly continued to deny her involvement during subsequent interrogations. On April 26, 2016, Kelly seemingly evaded the authorities, prompting a federal manhunt. Walter, who had cooperated with the police, was shocked and fearful that Kelly might evade justice and potentially target him. The police eventually tracked Kelly's phone to the West Coast, and on April 28th, they arrested her at her cousin's home in Wingo, Kentucky. Once in custody, Kelly confessed to her relationship with Christopher Rain, revealing that she had wanted to leave her husband and start a new life with him. However, when Jason discovered her infidelity, their situation escalated, and Kelly was bound by a pact they had made on their wedding night, obliging her to kill her lover if her cheating was exposed. Kelly Cochran claimed she never intended to follow through on an agreement she made with her husband, Jason, but he was determined to see it through. The agreement was a threat to kill Christopher Rain, Kelly's lover, if she didn't end the affair. Kelly didn't want to do it, but she ultimately helped Jason commit the crime. On October 14, 2015, Christopher arrived at Kelly's house while her husband was away. Kelly offered him dinner and intimacy, and they went upstairs to the bedroom. However, Jason suddenly appeared, panicked and holding a rifle. Without hesitation, he shot Christopher in the head, killing him instantly. Under Jason's direction, Kelly helped dismember Christopher's body using a hacksaw, detaching his limbs and head from his torso. They placed the remains in trash bags and dumped them in the woods near Crystal Falls. They also drove Christopher's car away from the house to avoid suspicion and thoroughly cleaned the house to remove evidence of the crime. Kelly later confessed to her role in the crime, saying she wanted revenge against Jason for forcing her to end her affair with Christopher. She was deeply in love with Christopher and felt Jason had deprived her of happiness. Months later, on February 22, 2016, Kelly killed Jason by suffocating him after giving him a lethal dose of medication. She then helped the police find Christopher's remains, which were buried in the woods near Crystal Falls. A team of investigators and a canine unit searched the area and eventually found a human skull with a bullet hole, confirming it was Christopher's severed head. A .22 caliber bullet, a broken gun, and glasses likely belonging to Reagan were found at the scene. Dental records were used to identify the victim's remains, finally solving the 2-year-old missing person case. In April 2016, Kelly Cochran was formally charged with the murders of Christopher Regan and Jason Cochran. On February 13, 2017, the 34-year-old was arraigned in Michigan State Court. The prosecutor argued that Kelly was the mastermind behind both crimes and that her motive was rage and jealousy. Christopher viewed their relationship as casual, but Kelly genuinely loved him and wanted a future together. When Christopher refused to commit, Kelly decided to kill him, making up a story about a pact with her husband. The prosecution had strong evidence, including Kelly's confession in court. However, Kelly claimed she was being abused by her jealous husband, who had planned and committed the crime. She said he hid in the basement, caught the lovers off guard, and then shot Christopher in a rage. Kelly claimed Jason suggested dismembering the body and coerced her into helping by threatening to kill her. This version raised doubts about Kelly's guilt, but the jury still found her guilty of premeditated murder. Kelly was sentenced to life without parole. Jason Cochran's case was settled with a plea agreement, and Kelly received an additional 65 years in prison. Kelly was sent to Crown Point Correctional Facility in Michigan, where she is serving her sentence and regrets that her personal life didn't work out. In a phone interview, Kelly said, "I tried to do what I thought was right. I got married." She also shared, "It was good in the beginning, but in the end, all my efforts were in vain. All I did was work while my husband played computer games." In prison, Kelly continues to reveal details of her crimes, claiming she and Jason committed more crimes and that Christopher was just one of their many victims. However, Kelly's claims are difficult to verify, and there is no concrete evidence to support them. Her brother has also heard similar claims, but there is no evidence to back them up. Detective Jeremy Ogden is investigating the details, hoping to find evidence of other possible crimes committed by Kelly and Jason Cochran.